Yo, what's up guys, Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I've recently used to get a few 5-0s with in the new constructed events on Arena. So I'm currently 25-5 with this deck across 6 constructed events, and I've managed to get 3 5-0s so far, so the deck's been performing really well for me, and it's been so much fun to play as well. And now before I get into it, there's going to be an MTGAzone link down in the description. If you click on that, it'll have the deck list there that you can just import into Arena if you want to try the deck out for yourself. And I'm also in the process of writing a full text article about this deck that will have more details, a full sideboard guide, how I change the deck for best of one, and some tips and tricks to help you play the deck as well. So as soon as that's up, I'll link it down in the description as well. So anyway, with that all out of the way, this is my Mardu Fiddlebender deck in Explorer. And this is a deck that is largely built around 2 cards, Oswald Fiddlebender and Onicole Anvil. So we'll start by having a look at the Anvil. So this is 2 mana artifact, and the first time an artifact leaves the battlefield during our turn, we get a 1/1 token, and we can tap it and sacrifice an artifact to drain the opponent for 1. So the idea with Anvil is we get it online as soon as possible, and just start making a steady stream of 1/1 tokens every turn, which is really useful in basically every matchup. Against aggressive decks, we can use the tokens to just chump block and stabilize, and against the slow decks like Control, we can use the tokens to pressure their life total and their planeswalkers as well. And then the ability that we can drain for 1 every turn off sacrificing an artifact is really nice because it gives us good reach as well. It means that we can often just drain the opponent out without even needing to connect in combat. So we have quite a lot of artifacts in the deck to enable Anvil. The best 2 are Implement of Combustion and Terrarian. These are both cards that we can play on turn 1, then play Anvil on turn 2, activate the Anvil to sacrifice them to drain the opponent for 1 and create a 1/1, and then Terrarian and Implement of Combustion both draw us a card when they go to the graveyard as well, so they immediately replace themselves. Now the downside of these cards is when we have them on our own without our engine pieces, they aren't that great. Implement of Combustion can be useful at picking off 1 loyalty planeswalkers, so for example if you're against Control and they have Teferi and they tuck something, we can use Implement to finish off the Teferi, or if they have a Narset on 1 loyalty we can use to pick it off. And Terrarian, sometimes the mana fixing off this is nice because we do have cards that cost 2 different colours of mana on turn 2, and we are running a 3 colour deck, so they can be useful on their own, but for the most part we want them alongside our engine pieces like Anvil, Rite of Oblivion or Fiddlebender. Then we've got 4 copies of Voldaren Epicure, 1 mana 1/1, when it enters the battlefield we hit the opponent for 1 and create a blood token. This is another card that's really nice at enabling Anvil on turn 2 because we can just sacrifice the blood token to Anvil's ability on turn 2 and immediately start making tokens. But even if we have more mana, we can just sacrifice the blood token, get the looting ability, and get a token off Anvil anyway. Because the really nice thing about Anvil is we don't need to activate its ability in order to get the 1/1. As long as an artifact leaves the battlefield, we still get the token. So if we have spare mana, we can just activate the blood token, get the value off it, and still get the 1/1 as well. Then we've also got 4 copies of Experimental Synthesizer. This is really nice as sort of a card advantage engine in the deck, because we get a card in exile that we can play the turn when we play it, and when we sacrifice it either to its own ability or to our sack outlets like Anvil, we also get another card then, so we can kind of get 2 pieces of card advantage off this. The one downside of Synthesizer compared to the other 1-drops that we're running in the deck is that we ideally don't really want to be playing this before turn 3, because there's a chance that we won't be able to play what we hit off it. You know, this isn't a good turn 2 enabler for Anvil, because if we just play it on turn 1 we won't be able to cast what we hit. Because everything in the deck doesn't cost more than 2, we can confidently play this at the start of our 3rd turn, assuming we have a land in hand, and we'll be able to hit whatever we hit, whatever we exile off it. So Synthesizer is just great once we have mana available at just ensuring that we don't run out of gas, as well as being really good with the Anvil as well. So then the other card that we've got in the deck is Oswald Fiddlebender, and this is a 2 mana 2/2, and it has the ability we can pay 1 white, tap it, and sacrifice an artifact to search our library for an artifact that costs 1 more than the artifact we sacrificed and put it into play. So even on its own, being able to tutor up artifacts out the deck is such a strong ability, but the great thing with Fiddlebender in this particular build is it synergizes so well with Anvil. First of all because it gives us redundancy for these 1 mana artifacts that we're running. Like I said, the downside of running Implement of Combustion and Terrarian is, on their own, when you don't have Anvil, they're not great, but they also pair really nicely with Fiddlebender, so even if we don't have Anvil, we can sacrifice our Implement of Combustion or Terrarian to Fiddlebender to tutor up an artifact, like a 2-drop artifact from our deck, and we get to draw a card as well. You know, similarly with Experimental Synthesizer, we can sack it and then get a card off the Synthesizer as well, so it gives us really nice redundancy for these 1 mana artifacts that traditionally in Anvil decks aren't great when you don't have the Anvil. The other great thing about this is that we can also use it to tutor up the Anvil itself, so as you see, we've got a lot of 1-drop artifacts in the deck. We can sacrifice those to Fiddlebender in order to tutor up the anvil itself. So it's a great way to find the anvil. If the opponent doesn't kill Fiddlebender, it's very easy to just tutor up 4 anvils out of your deck, at which point you're creating 4 tokens each turn and potentially draining the opponent out for 4. So Fiddlebender being able to find anvil is so powerful. And additionally, we also have some one of tutor targets that we can hit off it as well. So we can sacrifice 1 mana artifacts in order to get Glass Casket as additional removal, and also Unlicensed Hearse as Graveyard Hate, which is really important right now, especially against a deck like Greasefang or any other decks. There's Phoenix in the format and decks running Croxer as well. So having main deck access to Graveyard Hate that we can tutor up with Fiddlebender is really nice. And on top of that, we can also tutor up 1 mana artifacts off tokens, because the tokens that we get off Voldaren Epicure or the anvil count as 0 mana, so we can sacrifice them to Fiddlebender in order to tutor up 1-drop artifacts. So similarly, we've also got some one-of tutor targets here that we can hit. We can get Portable Hole as removal against cheap creatures or other cheap non-creature permanents that we can deal with. We've also got a copy of Pithing Needle, which is a really important card in the format right now, because it can shut off Planeswalkers, which is really important against control. And, even against Sacrifice, they're often boarding in Ob Nixilis. This is also great against Sacrifice because it can shut off Witch's Oven and Cauldron Familiar. And additionally, you can also name Parhelion against Greasefang, which will stop them crewing up the Parhelion with their Greasefang, and basically shuts off their main combo in the deck. So Pithing Needle feels really good in the format right now. And we have a second one in the sideboard because of that as well. And then we also have a single copy of Soul Guide Lantern as a way to get Graveyard Hate if we only have access to 0 mana artifacts. So similar to Unlicensed Hearse, we can just tutor up Graveyard Hate off Fiddlebender no matter what artifacts we have in play. Then outside of these 3, we can also tutor up any of our 1 mana artifacts as well. Now most of the time we'll usually be wanting to get Experimental Synthesizer because you get the card advantage off it immediately, and then obviously you can get card advantage again when you sacrifice it. So if you have mana available, you can sacrifice your blood tokens or your anvil tokens in order to get Synthesizer, just to keep the card advantage rolling. Then the following turn you can sacrifice a Synthesizer to get another anvil. So like I said, if Fiddlebender lives, you can just create these insane value loops where you just set up a bunch of anvils, constantly then sacrifice the anvil tokens to get Synthesizers, and you have this constant tokens and constant card advantage every single turn. Additionally, you also have the option to get Implement or Terrarium, which is sometimes beneficial. Say you only have 1 mana to activate Fiddlebender left after whatever else you've done for the turn, you wouldn't be able to play what you hit off Synthesizer, so in those instances it's often right to just grab an Implement or Terrarium in order to set up for the following turn. So Oswald Fiddlebender, such a powerful card, and it synergizes so well with the anvil. I briefly want to talk about Portable Hole and Glass Casket, because it might look a bit weird running 2 copies of Casket and only 1 Portable Hole, when Portable Hole is generally seen as the more powerful card because it's slightly cheaper and it can deal with non-creatures as well. The main reason I'm running more Casket is because we only have 8 cards in the deck that can produce tokens in Epicure and only Cult Anvil. So it's not unusual to have situations where you only have access to 1 mana artifacts to sacrifice. And in those instances, I had a lot of games where I was running 2 Portable Hole and 1 Glass Casket, where I wouldn't have any tokens because I just hadn't drawn the Epicure or Anvil. And so I'd use Anvil to get, I'd use Fiddlebender to get a Glass Casket to take out one of their creatures, and then they'd play another creature that I need to be able to kill, and I would be out of 2 mana artifacts that I could tutor up. So because we're running more 1 mana artifacts than we are ways to make tokens, I feel like it's more important to have more Glass Casket just so we don't run out of removal in those situations. Then we've also got 4 copies of Ingenious Smith. So there's a 2 mana creature. When it enters the battlefield, we look at the top 4, put an artifact in our hand and the rest on the bottom of the library. And then the first time each turn where we put an artifact into play, it gets a +1/+1 token. So the great thing about this deck is we're naturally running a bunch of artifacts anyway, so you're almost always going to be able to hit at least one thing off this, which is great. So it replaces itself automatically. It gives us a bit of card selection if we hit multiple artifacts in there. We can use it to hit Anvil, we can use it to hit artifacts that we bring in from our sideboard as well. So this is just great at ensuring that it replaces itself and helps us dig for our other artifacts. And then the fact that it grows every turn is really great in, against aggro, at being able to block, and against the slower decks as well, because this is a card that trades very well with removal. The opponent can't really afford to ignore this because the amount of artifacts that we're going to be generating, this is going to be getting a +1/+1 token basically every single turn. So it'll eventually get to the point where if the opponent ignores it, it'll be too big and be able to win the game. And if the opponent does use removal on it, assuming you hit an artifact off the end of the battlefield ability, it's already replaced itself. So we're kind of 2-for-1ing the opponent at that point. So Ingenious Smith is really strong in the deck. And then finally we've got 4 copies of Rite of Oblivion, which is another really important card. First of all, because it gives us additional redundancy for these 1-mana artifacts. You know, like I said, these are weak in pure Anvil decks when you don't have the Anvil. Now with Rite of Oblivion and Fiddlebender, we have 12 cards in the deck that all get really good advantage off our Terrarian, Implement and Synthesizer. Rite of Oblivion in particular is very important at being able to take out permanents that the rest of the deck struggles to deal with. So especially big creatures, you know, the first sort of build I made of this was much heavier on Portable Hole and Glass Casket as its interaction, and then the deck would have no way to beat cards like Crackling Drake or Corvold, so having Rite of Oblivion be able to take out bigger creatures is really important. But it's also really important at being able to take out Planeswalkers against control, and sort of artifact and enchantment engine pieces, so against Jund Food, for example, having this be able to take out Witch's Oven and Trade of Crumbs is huge. And the fact that we can also cast it from the graveyard with Flashback means that we get 2 activations off this. And because we're running so many, you know, cards that are good to sacrifice with Implement, Terrarian, Synthesizer, the 1/1 tokens that we create off Anvil, we're almost always going to be having stuff in play that we can sacrifice this. So Rite of Oblivion, just really good at giving the deck ways to beat permanents that we can't normally deal with. Then in terms of the mana base, 22 lands has felt like a good amount. I initially started with 21, but I just had way too many 1-land hands that I had to mulligan. 22 has felt like a good amount. And we've got 1 plane so we don't get blown up by Field of Ruin and stuff like that. And then the rest are all dual lands because we do need red and white on turn 1. We need white-black and black-red on turn 2. So there is quite a lot of strain on the mana base. So running all duals has felt good. I haven't really found that I've struggled with mana in this deck in particular. It is a bit annoying having to run so many of these fast lands here, because it is a bit annoying having them enter tapped on turn 4 and forwards, but I felt like it's so important to have actual dual lands in this deck just to ensure that we can cast everything as the game goes on. And then finally we've got Gigantha as the companion, which is basically free in the deck. Obviously, looking at the curve of the deck, this is a deck that would be perfect for Lurrus, but unfortunately Lurrus is banned in Explorer. I might as well address this because I'll probably get some questions about potentially porting this deck to Historic, where Lurrus is legal. And I have, you know, it is potentially a reasonable Historic deck. I did test that out for a couple of matches, nowhere near enough to actually judge how good the deck will be. But my initial sort of hesitation about this deck in Historic is twofold. First of all, I think Historic is just a much more powerful format in general. So even though Lurrus is a pretty meaningful upgrade, outside of that you don't really get many other upgrades to the deck. You know, you could potentially run Esper Sentinel, but I'm not really sure what you'd cut for it, and I'm not sure it's worth running as just a tutor target either. And outside of that, I can't really think of any cards that are Historic legal that aren't Explorer legal. So compared to the rest of the format, I think this deck is going to be a lot more powerful in Explorer compared to the other top decks, as opposed to Historic, where the rest of the top decks are a lot faster and more powerful. And the second big issue I have with this deck in Historic is that I don't think it has a good way to beat Divine Purge. So Divine Purge, oh, it's not coming up on here for some reason. I don't know why, that's weird. But Divine Purge is basically a sweeper that just gets rid of all artifacts. And my experience playing artifact heavy decks in Historic is the only way you can reasonably beat that is by playing an incredibly aggressive strategy with discard spells, or be playing blue for counter spells. And because this particular deck takes a long time to close the game out, I don't think cards like Thoughtseize will be good enough to beat Divine Purge. So as long as Divine Purge is a mainstay in the format, I really think this kind of deck is going to struggle there. But in Explorer, where Divine Purge isn't legal and the rest of the top decks are considerably less powerful, I think this deck has a lot better chance there. So that's the main deck. It's been so much fun to play, and it's felt really strong to me, so I really recommend it if you enjoy this sort of deck. Now onto the sideboard, we've got the extra 3 copies of Portable Hole just as additional removal. You know, just brilliant against small creatures, and also other cards, you know, against the Jund Food deck, being able to take out Trail of Crumbs and Witch's Oven is huge. And the nice thing about Portable Hole is it's another card that we can hit off in Genius Smith, so post-sideboard against the decks where we need additional removal, we have a much higher chance of hitting off this Smith as well, which is nice. We've got extra 3 copies of Soul Guide Lantern for Graveyard Hate. Running 3 copies mainly as a consideration to the Greasefang deck, because that is a combo deck that we struggle to interact with, and Graveyard Hate is definitely the best way to shut that off. I felt with 4 Soul Guide Lantern and 1 Unlicensed Hearse, all of which we can tutor up with Fiddlebender, that matchup has felt really good to me because of the Graveyard Hate. And obviously, you know, with Phoenix and Crocs or another graveyard shenanigans going on in the format, Lantern is just useful there as well. Against Control, we've got 2 copies of Thoughtseize and 4 copies of Ob Nixilis, so it might look a bit weird running them this way round. Typically against control decks you want to go 4 copies of Thoughtseize before anything else, but in this particular build, since the deck doesn't close the games out that fast, I felt the deck is vulnerable to cards like Farewell, and I don't feel like Thoughtseize is particularly effective in a deck like this where we struggle to close the game out quickly, because you can Thoughtseize on turn 1 or 2 to make way for your engine pieces, but then the opponent is going to have time to top deck into their Farewells and stuff like that. So I felt like Ob Nixilis is much better at being proactive and dodging stuff like Farewell. You know, I feel like the games where I got Ob Nixilis down on turn 3 were way better than the matchups where we just Thoughtseize on turn 1. So I felt like Ob Nixilis is really good at being more proactive in the control matchups, as well as giving you a way that will dodge their best cards against you like Farewell. But Thoughtseize is still useful, especially against other combo decks as well. And then we've also got a couple more tutor targets. I've got the second copy of Pithing Needle for matchups where you prefer the effect, like against opposing planeswalkers like Control. And there are also some matchups like against Sacrifice where we often want to name 2 different things. So for example, say we tutor up a Pithing Needle to shut off Witch's Oven, we might then want to tutor up another one to shut up Ob Nixilis later in the game. So having access to 2 off Fiddlebender is nice in those sorts of matchups. And then finally we've got 1 copy of Wreck and a Bankbuster. So this is just useful in slower, grindier matchups like Control and Midrange, just giving a tutor target that we can hit off the Fiddlebender that just will draw us cards continuously. So Bankbuster is just another really nice tutor target in the slower matchups as well. So that's the deck. Like I said, I've been having so much fun with this deck. I really recommend it if this is your sort of thing. If you've got any questions at all about the deck, drop me a comment. And now just onto the gameplay. I've got a full 5-match constructed event so you guys can see the deck in action. So I hope you enjoy. Big up. Okay, sweet. Here we go. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, this hand looks decent. We've got Epicure into either Fiddlebender or Anvil on turn 2, which is perfect. That's what you want to see, really. So we'll definitely lead on the Epicure here. Haunted Ridge could be a number of things. We'll see what the opponent runs out here. Now, we do have to decide whether to go for Anvil or Fiddlebender, which usually will come down to how likely we think the opponent is to have removal. Okay, since the opponent's already played a Blood Tithe Harvester, they already have a way to kill the Fiddlebender, so we would either have to Rite of Oblivion, kill the Harvester, and then go for Fiddlebender next turn. But I think the opponent, you know, they could be on Greasefang, which maybe that would be the correct line. But if we're against just Red-Black Midrange, I feel like getting Anvil online is much more important here. Because if we go Rite of Oblivion, we kind of have to sacrifice the Epicure and then leave the blood token for Fiddlebender. And if the opponent has a Fatal Push or something, I feel like that's a real waste of a Rite of Oblivion at that point. So yeah, I think getting Anvil online here is probably just more important, especially if they do end up being on Red-Black Midrange, because getting Anvil online in that matchup is pretty huge. So they Thoughtseize us here. Be interesting to see what they take. Potentially the Anvil, because they already have a way to kill the Fiddlebender in play already off that Blood Tithe Harvester. And hitting Rite of Oblivion when it has flashback doesn't feel great either, from the opponent's perspective anyway. So next turn, I mean, as long as they have Blood Tithe Harvester with a blood token in play... Okay, they now sack the blood token. I was going to say we can't really afford to play Fiddlebender, but now they've sacked the blood token. Although they know we have Fiddlebender, so I mean, I kind of have to assume they have another removal spell in play, but I'm still going to run out the Fiddlebender here. Force them to have another removal spell. Now we could attack with the token first here because we're going to sacrifice it anyway, but they know the exact contents of our hand, so they're not going to fall for a bluff and let the damage through. Ah, okay, so they had a second Blood Tithe Harvester, that makes sense. So then they can just use their first one to kill the Fiddlebender here. I still think that was worth it though, because I don't think it's worth, at this point in the game, using a Rite of Oblivion on the Blood Tithe Harvester. I mean, at this point, since we have nothing else to do, since we've just drawn lands, I think we might just have to fire off the Rite of Oblivion here, which doesn't feel great. Ideally, we want to save the flashback on this to kill that Croxer if the game gets to the point where they escape that. Or to kill, you know, potential Planeswalkers they might be running as well. So that is a little bit annoying. Maybe we... I was thinking maybe we should have used Rite of Oblivion on the Blood Tithe Harvester before we played the Oswald, but if they'd had just Fatal Push as their removal instead, I think that would have been a pretty poor exchange, so... I still think that was probably the right play. So we're flooding out here pretty badly, which is a bit annoying. And ideally, again, we would like to save this Rite of Oblivion for the Croxer if possible. I'm going to attack here since we have a few unknowns in hand. They might potentially let the damage through. You know, thinking that we have a way to buff the token, maybe. Okay, they don't fall for it, but we don't lose anything from attacking there. So I'm just going to sacrifice the token to drain the opponent for one and replace it. And I think I'm just going to put Gigantha in hand here. Like I said, I really would like to save this Rite of Oblivion for a better permanent to kill than the Blood Tithe Harvester, really. So, that's unfortunate. So they've got the Graveyard Trespasser that can exile the Rite of Oblivion, which is a little bit annoying. If we'd known they'd had that, I think we would have fired it off sooner, but I still think it was probably a waste to use that on a Blood Tithe Harvester when we know they have a Croxer. Okay. So we draw another Rite of Oblivion, which is nice. Now we have a replacement one, but unfortunately I think we kind of have to use this Rite of Oblivion the first time on Graveyard Trespasser anyway, because if we don't, they can just attack with the Trespasser and exile the Rite of Oblivion, and we want to be able to get value off the flashback on it. So if we draw another land next turn, which I hope we don't because we're already flooding out pretty badly, but I think we'll probably just Rite of Oblivion the Graveyard Trespasser, discard one of the lands to the ward tax, and then hopefully we can use the Rite of Oblivion to hit something like a Croxer or a Planeswalker later in the game. Now getting Gigantha down last time was pretty huge because it does stop their attacks. Okay, they got Rider for the Gigantha, but I mean, that's a fine exchange. We got Gigantha from Companion for free, so we're not really losing out too much on that exchange, really. So they're going to attack with the Trespasser here. They'll gain an extra life, which is a little bit annoying. Oh, they're not going to attack. That's a bit odd. So Terrarian's a nice draw here because it allows us to activate the Anvil and draw an extra card. I'm trying to think why they didn't attack there. I guess maybe they didn't want us to kill the Blood Tithe Harvester and start getting in, because they are starting to get relatively low on life total here because of the Anvil. So maybe they were worried about that. So again, I don't really want to use Rite of Oblivion here if I don't have to. They're not really attacking with anything, so I don't really feel like I need to kill the Trespasser. I'm going to set stops during the opponent's turn here, just so it doesn't give away that we don't have any instant speed interaction. Because if we don't set stops, then it will just skip straight through and the opponent will be able to tell we don't have any interaction. Okay, so they attack with the Harvester. I think I'm fine to let that through. You know, we could potentially triple block, but if they have 2 removal spells, we just get completely blown out there. If they don't have removal spells, we're losing them. And if we just double block and they have a Fatal Push, that's really bad for us. So, okay, interesting. So they have Ob Nixilis here, so that's kind of annoying. I presume they make a token off one and then plus the other one, which will start gaining them 2 life every turn. Yeah, so they make a token here, which means that no matter what we do off this plus, they're going to go up to 11 life. Like, our main route to victory there looked like we were, you know, relatively close to draining them out, but now Ob Nixilis is kind of annoying in that front. Okay, Anvil is a nice draw here, so I think we'll probably play the Anvil first, and then I think we're pretty interested in taking out the Trespasser here. Like I said, I think we kind of have to use this first Rite of Oblivion on the Trespasser, or they'll be able to exile it otherwise. Now, I'm thinking whether we could potentially go for Rite of Oblivion and flash it back in order to kill both Ob Nixilises here, but I think getting the second Anvil in play is really important. So I'm just going to use first Rite of Oblivion here on the Trespasser, sacrifice one of our 1/1 tokens to do so, and then we pay the ward tax, and then we can attack down the 1 loyalty Ob Nixilis with our other 2 creatures. Now, like I said, we could have held the Anvil in hand and potentially go Rite of Oblivion, the Trespasser, and then flash it back to kill the 4 loyalty of Nixilis, which there's definitely, you know, I could see the argument for that play, but since we now have 4 tokens in play, I think we're relatively good here at being able to attack down that other Planeswalker, and like I said, I would like to keep this second Rite of Oblivion for something like that Croxer, because we don't currently have a good way to deal with it, and they're already 1 card away from escaping it. So, say they had their 5th land here, they could crack one of the blood tokens, put the 6th card in the graveyard, and then escape Croxer. So I think keeping Rite of Oblivion for Croxer when we know it's coming is very important here. And like I said, since we have 4 tokens in play, we have a reasonable chance of just being able to attack down that other Ob Nixilis anyway. So we'll see what they've got here. Another Graveyard Trespasser getting rid of Rite of Oblivion would be a nightmare here, so I'm hoping they don't have another way to interact with the graveyard, because them getting Croxer in play without us having access to Rite of Oblivion, we don't really have a good way to beat. Like, we can chump block the Croxer with our tokens every turn, obviously, but outside of that, I don't think we have a good way to actually beat it, really. Especially because they can... Well, they're gaining 2 life off this Obnixus every turn. Okay, Sorin. So we'll see what they do here. Hopefully they plus. Okay, they minus... that's annoying because I think that kind of forces our hand to Rite of Oblivion the token here, because our only real way of winning this game is draining them out. And now they can gain life off Obnixilus, and they can gain life off that 2/3 lifelinker. So I think we kind of have to kill the token here. And then we can attack down the Sorin, thankfully, which is nice. But because we're doing this, we're losing our only way to kill the Croxer. But again, I think with 2 Anvils in play, I think the way to kill them in this game is to just try and drain them out. We can beat Croxer if we're draining them with Anvil every turn. But we can't, you know, they're just going to be able to gain too much life if we let this 2/3 live here. So I think we have to kill the 2/3 token here. And I think we're interested in killing Sorin. I mean, we really would like to kill this Obnixilus as well, because they are gaining 2 life off it every turn. But I think Sorin is the more pressing threat because of the card advantage it can give. Now, I'm really hoping they don't have Fatal Push. That would be really annoying if they did. And I would really like them to block with this Devil token as well, because that is the card in play that is giving them 2 life off the Obnixilus plus every turn. And then I'm going to play the Inspiring Vantage. Like, the other annoying thing about having to do that play is they now have 6 cards in graveyard for Croxer. So I'm definitely going to play the land out here, because I imagine they're going to escape Croxer. Okay, so they're back up to 15 now, which is kind of a nightmare. We really would like to draw another Rite of Oblivion or a Pithing Needle to shut off that Obnixilus, and then we actually have a way to potentially win the game, even if they have a Croxer. You know, draining 2 for every turn with Anvil, and being able to consistently chump block Croxer. I think if we can find a way to take out this Obnixilus, doing that will just give us a way to beat Croxer here, even without Rite of Oblivion. So we do need a good top deck here. I mean, we could still potentially just attack Obnixilus with everything, and then just sack whatever they block to get another 2 tokens, keep 1 back to block the Croxer. Oh, wow. Well, we'd have loved to have seen that last turn, obviously, but it is what it is. I think we'll probably play the Lantern first here and just crack it to see what we hit, because we could potentially hit a Portable Hole or a Rite of Oblivion, which will completely change how we attack here. So I think we're just going to play the Lantern and crack it, which will trigger the Anvil. We'll get 2 tokens immediately. And so just hoping to hit Portable Hole or Rite of Oblivion to deal with Croxer here would be amazing. Or even Pithing Needle to shut off the Obnixilus would be great. Okay, Terrarion, I think we'll probably just play that and then probably activate Anvil. Again, if we can draw a Rite of Oblivion or Portable Hole, that would be amazing. And it would make our attacks a lot more informed as well. Okay, so that's a little bit annoying. I think because the Obnixilus is getting so close to ultimating, and we really need to stop them gaining 2 life every turn, we just have to attack the Obnixilus here. And they'll obviously block with the Croc, so they'll probably block the Epicure because we don't have a way to sacrifice it. But I'm really hoping... they don't, okay. Yeah, I was going to say, I really hope they block with the Devil, because they've gained, what, like 6 or 8 life just off that Devil being in play already. So I'm going to keep the land in hand here, because I think the benefit we get from having a land in hand is so low. And I think because it looks like we haven't, the opponent thinks we probably wouldn't just keep a land in hand, so yeah, they choose to uptick the Obnixilus before attacking. So that means that we don't lose 2 life off the Obnixilus trigger there. If they'd have attacked with Croxer first, that would have been kind of annoying, but since we kept a card in hand, I think the opponent was probably thinking, that's probably an instant speed way to kill Croxer, so I might as well plus the Obnixilus first, which is what we wanted. So Chandra is pretty annoying here. Now we have 2 Planeswalkers that we kind of need to deal with. So this isn't looking great, but I mean, again, if we can draw a way to kill Croxer here, I think we're still in reasonable shape because we have so many tokens in play. Okay, so they play Bone Crusher Giant. So I assume they just attack with Croxer here. We'll just block with one of our 1/1s. And we really need to take out this Chandra now as well. Which is annoying because, taking out Obnixilus was really important to stopping them gaining life. Now I think we just need to take out Chandra to stay alive, which is a bit problematic. But again, the 1/1 tokens that we're making off Anvil here are huge at keeping us in this game, are both giving us ways to attack the Planeswalkers as well as keeping creatures back on defense as well. So we'll just sack the Terrarion, get some more tokens, drain the opponent for 1, and see what we hit here. So Epicure's not great. At least it gives us a way to cycle away whatever we draw next turn if it's not great. So I think here we have to prioritise taking out Chandra, unfortunately. And they will be able to block to defend it. Okay, so they block with the Devil token. That's nice because it means they're not going to be gaining life off the Obnixilus anymore, but with a Chandra and a Croxer and now a Bone Crusher Giant in play, I presume they take out one of our other tokens here. This isn't looking great. I mean, again, I still think if we can draw an answer to Croxer next turn, we have a reasonable way of getting back in the game, but there's a lot of cards that, you know, if they have removal here, we're just in trouble. So yeah, I mean, I think the turning point in this game was that Obnixilus coming into play, forcing us to use that Rite of Oblivion that we would have liked to save for Croxer. If we had a Rite of Oblivion to deal with Croxer, this game would have been completely different. Okay, so they make a 1/1 token, makes sense, gives them more defense and starts them gaining life as well. They add some mana off the Chandra. That could mean they want to animate one of their creature lands, maybe? Or maybe crack a blood token. Okay, so they Bone Crusher Giant one of our tokens, so that means they're guaranteed to get in for 4 with the Bone Crusher Giant and deal us 3 off the Croxer here. They could also fire up one of their creature lands in addition to that, which is dealing a huge amount of damage here. Okay. Well, we're just dead here then, right? So what are they doing? 13 damage? Yeah, because we take 3 off the Croxer trigger and then 10 off the attack, so that was kind of unfortunate. We were on the back foot there. But again, you know, had we drawn an answer to Croxer, I think that game would have been a lot different. So overall, I think we've got some nice tools to help in this matchup. We've got Pithing Needle to help against the Planeswalkers and potentially some extra graveyard hate to deal with Croxer as well, which is nice. I'm not sure we really want much else here, and we have got quite a lot to cut if we're going to bring all of that in, so I think we'll probably trim a Glass Casket here. You know, we definitely want to keep at least 1 in because it's important as a Fiddlebender target. But, it's tough to know what to cut here, really. Because most things in the deck are pretty important. Maybe we don't need all 4 lanterns. I think maybe 2 is fine. I would like to keep both Pithing Needles because we know they're already main decking a couple of Planeswalkers, so having the option to get multiple off Fiddlebender is nice. And I think just trimming 1 more card we might be interested in trimming Ingenious Smith, maybe trimming Epicure. This is tough. I'm not really sure what the right cut is here. Yeah, I think I'm just going to trim an Ingenious Smith here and run it back. But yeah, I think this matchup should be pretty good overall. We did flood out in the early game there, and we still had quite a few turns to draw answers there. So yeah, from my experience playing this matchup so far, it's felt pretty good because if you can get your Anvil online, you have ways to really outgrind them. If you can get Fiddlebender in play and they don't have a way to kill it immediately, it's really hard for them to beat that. And since we have 2 Pithing Needles now, we have pretty good ways of shutting off their Planeswalkers, which is the main way they kept in that game. Had they not been gaining 2 life every turn off the Obnixilus, I think we could have fairly easily drained them out with Anvil that game, so I think if we can set up our engines and we don't flood out as much, this matchup should be pretty favourable for us, from my experience anyway. You know, it's kind of reminiscent of, maybe not quite as heavily skewed as the Food versus Arcanist matchup in Historic, but it's kind of similar in that they struggle to deal with card advantage engines once they're online, and this deck is just full of those sorts of card advantage engines between Fiddlebender and Anvil and other stuff like that. So going first here, and yeah, even though we don't have Fiddlebender or Anvil, this is pretty good. We have a turn 1 artifact and we can dig for one of those cards off the Ingenious Smith. You know, Smith is another card that's pretty difficult for them to interact with favourably because it replaces itself most of the time. Okay, so duress us. Losing our graveyard hate here, if they take Unlicensed Hearse, could be kind of annoying because if they have Croxer, we don't have a great way to deal with it at the moment, and getting a Hearse in play would be pretty huge at just shutting that off, as well as giving you know, we can block most of their creatures as the game goes on with Hearse as well. So drawing another land is great here. I think I'm going to crack the Terrarian first, just to see what we hit. Oh wow, nice. We hit a Fiddlebender, that's great. So now, you know, this is putting a lot of pressure on the opponent, because they need to have a removal spell here, or we're just going to start running away with the game, I think. I mean, they are likely to run a lot of removal, so I wouldn't be surprised if they did have removal for it, but we're at least putting them to the test here. Okay, they did have Bonecrusher Giant, which is fine, but that means that our Ingenious Smith is more likely to survive here, which is pretty huge, because one more turn and this is going to outscale removal like Bonecrusher Giant. Okay, this is an interesting decision. We do miss, like, we would like to have Graveyard Hate for something like Croxer, but I think Anvil is such a strong card in this matchup in particular that I think it's really important to get here. So now the opponent's kind of in a bind, because they either have to kill this Smith or it starts to outscale their red base removal, or we get Anvil online here. So they choose to Bonecrusher Giant, which is fine, means we get Anvil online. So I'm going to go Anvil first here, I think. Just so if we hit an untapped land off the Anvil activation, we can then also play the Ingenious Smith. So we'll see what we hit off the draw here. Okay, unfortunately we don't. And this is kind of one of the spots where having loads of fast lands is a bit annoying, because we would have loved to have an untapped land there, but I think having dual lands that enter untapped early is so important at making sure that we can cast what we hit, that it's worth being a little bit slower on later turns. Okay, so they play the Bonecrusher Giant out here, which is fine. They've still got a mana available through the Fable Passage. So I think we'll lead on Ingenious Smith here just to see what we hit, to help, you know, give us more information before we make our next decision. Okay, Synthesizer's nice. And I think getting Fiddlebender into play as soon as possible, just to force them to have another piece of removal, is really important. You know, we could have played Synthesize there and basically guaranteed that we hit, like, we can play what we hit off it, but I think it's more important to get Fiddlebender into play, see if they have removal, and if they don't, we can start cracking it next turn, which is pretty huge. So I'm going to attack here, just because might as well, you know, we're going to be sacrificing it anyway, so we might as well try and bluff, see if the opponent might let damage through. So yeah, sacrifice the token, we'll play the Goddess Shrine tapped, and then if they have removal for the Fiddlebender, we can just synthesize the next turn and try and dig for something. If they don't have removal for Fiddlebender, we get to Synthesizer and then activate Fiddlebender to get another Anvil out the deck, or maybe even Unlicensed Hearse if we wanted that. So thinking about it, actually, maybe this could be a matchup where we might be interested in wrecking a Bankbuster, but considering how difficult it was to find room for everything else, it might be that we actually want Graveyard Hate more than something like Bankbuster, because we know they're running Croxer. So they crack the passage here. I mean, ideally, we would love... Oh, wow, okay, they don't have removal for Fiddlebender, that's huge. I guess, you know, another good thing about this deck is when people see Anvil, they kind of assume that Graveyard Hate is going to be good against your deck, when our deck basically doesn't care about the graveyard at all. You know, the only piece of Graveyard Hate that really is annoying is Rest in Peace, because that shuts off Implement and Terrarian, drawing us a card that goes to the graveyard, but outside of that we're not really bothered at all. So we get our first Fiddlebender activation, which is huge here. We could sacrifice the token to get a 1-drop, but I think we're more interested in sacking the Synthesizer here. And again, we could go for Unlicensed Hearse or Anvil. Since we're not under immediate threat from Croxer, I think we're probably more interested in getting the Anvil here, just because Anvil is such a good card in the matchup. Then we can play the Terrarian that we hit off it. And then we can play the Pathway and just put Gigantha into hand here. We could use Casket on Gigantha, but like I said, we are kind of worried about Croxer a little bit. So I would rather save Glass Casket as a way to deal with something like Croxer, because we're not really too concerned about Bonecrusher Giant. You know, the Ingenious Smith is going to be outscaling them in 2 turns' time anyway, and Bonecrusher Giant can't attack its way through our Anvil tokens that easily. You know, as things stand, we're going to be able to be making tokens off our artifacts every single turn, so I might start just using the Anvil to drain the opponent for 1 anyway, because as things stand, we're pretty likely to keep getting artifacts anyway off Fiddlebender or the Terrarian. So they start activating the Hearse here, which, again, the only thing we're worried about with Hearse is that it will become a big creature later in the game, and since we have Anvils in play, we can just drain the opponent out without even needing to attack in combat. Okay, so they duress, so we do lose the glass casket, which again is pretty annoying if they have Croxer, but outside of that I'm not really too fussed. You know, there are the 3-drops that we saw last game. Graveyard Trespasser is a little bit annoying, but not particularly good against our board state with 2 Anvils in play. Okay, so they attack with the Bone Crusher Giant, so I think we're happy to just let that through, honestly. We could block and then activate the Anvil, but they only have 1 creature, so we can just attack with our tokens next turn anyway. Oh, okay, so they have Obnixus, that makes sense, I guess. I mean, the nice thing if Fiddlebender lives here is we can just sacrifice one of our Anvil tokens to get Pithing Needle, just to completely shut off Obnixus for the rest of the game. I mean, I'm sure the opponent has artifact removal. We saw K-Command last game, so I'm sure they'd have a way to kill Pithing Needle, but then they'd need to use their artifact removal on Pithing Needle instead of our Anvil or something like that, so I think we're just interested in getting Pithing Needle into play here, because we're not particularly well set up to attack these Obnixilus down. And like I said, even if they have artifact removal, they kind of need to use it on Pithing Needle, which means that our Anvils will just get to keep being used as the game goes on. So we'll get a Pithing Needle here, and just shut off the Obnixilus. And then I think I'll just play Gigantha here. I don't really want to attack with the Ingenious Smith yet, because we don't want to offer a trade with the Bone Crusher Giant, really. So I think we're just happy to pass here. And then next turn, if the opponent doesn't do anything crazy, I think we've completely turned the corner in this game, assuming they don't kill Pithing Needle either. But, you know, they barely have anything on board, and we have 2 big creatures and a bunch of 1/1s that we're going to be sacrificing to get more anyway, so I think we're pretty safe to start attacking next turn, assuming they don't do anything crazy here. Okay, they just passed, that's great. Oh, Rite of Oblivion's nice. So, I mean, they can crew Hearse here and turn it into a 6/6 to trade off with one of our creatures, but they would need to tap out their Bone Crusher Giant in order to do that. And so, and we could also use Rite of Oblivion to take out the Unlicensed Hearse, but I feel like we don't need to do that. We're so far ahead at this point that I think we can just afford to attack all directly at the opponent. Probably lose our Ingenious Smith to this Unlicensed Hearse, but our board is getting so wide that they're not going to be able to beat, you know, even if we do lose a creature in combat here, we just have such a lead on tempo that I don't think they're going to be able to come back in the game. And I would really like to save this Rite of Oblivion for something better, because as things stand, they're not going to be able to beat our board with Unlicensed Hearse, so I'd rather save Rite of Oblivion for like a Chandra or a Croxer or something like that. And the other weakness of playing Rite of Oblivion out here is if we do use it on Licensed Hearse and then try and use the flashback on a bigger permanent, if they have, like last game, if they have a Graveyard Trespasser, they can just exile it, and then we no longer have an answer to whatever problematic permanent they have. So we attacked first here because we thought they would use their Devil Ping on one of our tokens. Since the 3rd Anvil hasn't triggered yet, we can just sacrifice it in response and the token replaces itself. And then we'll just play Implement out here, and I think I'm going to save that for Fiddlebender next turn, and then we can sacrifice it and get our 4th Anvil into play. Okay, so they do have Thoughtseize, so Rite of Oblivion just goes to the graveyard, but that's fine, we can still flash it back. Although I guess, no, they have Unlicensed Hearse to exile it. But, I mean, assuming they don't top deck anything insane here, that's fine. And they kind of have to tap out the Unlicensed Hearse during their turn to stop us casting the Rite of Oblivion here. Because if they leave back the Hearse to block with, then that gives us a window to use Rite of Oblivion during our turn. Yeah, so they have to tap out the Hearse to exile here, which means that they can't use the Hearse to block anymore. So I think we'll just lead by getting the Anvil here. Or we could attack with the Fiddlebender maybe, but I think that's kind of greedy. They could still have removal, and we don't have lethal quite yet, so we might as well just play it safe here. Get the 4th Anvil here. I mean, the only thing that we're really dead to is if they're running like Shatterstorm or By Force or something like that, but I don't think many people are running those sorts of cards. And they would need to draw it like immediately. I'm pretty sure they would have played it last turn if they had something like that. So we'll attack him with everything here. And yeah, unless they're playing like Chain Whirler or Anger of the Gods or Shatterstorm, I really don't think that they're gonna be able to get back into this. Because that's one of the advantages, you know, the Arcanist, or not Arcanist, I say that because I'm used to playing Historic, but these sorts... Oh, we can just kill them off the Anvil activations. I forgot about that. But yeah, these sorts of mid-range decks don't have great ways to come back from behind if your deck is about setting up engines anyway. Okay, sweet. So that configuration felt pretty good for that game. I'm pretty happy to just run it back there. Just trying to think whether Bankbuster would be good, but like I said, I think Lantern is particularly good if we know the opponent is playing graveyard stuff like Croxer, because not only does it shut off Croxer, which is the main card we lost to in the first game, but it also synergizes fairly well with the Anvil itself as well. You know, even if they don't have anything in the graveyard we need to exile, we can just cycle it to draw a card during our turn, and if we have Anvil in play, that will just get us an extra token for that turn. So I think even though Bankbuster is nice in these sorts of slower mid-range matchups, I think if we need Graveyard Hate, that should probably take priority, because I think Lantern synergizes with the rest of the deck better, whereas Bankbuster is kind of just a tutor target for Fiddlebender that also happens to just draw us cards. Although having said that, the matches where I have bought in Bankbuster has been nice, especially once you get the tokens off it, because it creates a treasure token which then helps with Anvil as well, and it creates a 1/1 token that you can sacrifice. Oh no, you can't sacrifice it to Fiddlebender because it's not an artifact. I always get confused by that because it looks like an artifact but it's not. I think it's just a colourless creature, but either way, Bankbuster seems better in control than Croxer matchups. So this hand, obviously we don't have red for Anvil, but we do have Terrarion, which we can use to produce red mana, so just gotta hope they don't Thoughtseize away a Terrarion here. But if they do have Thoughtseize or Duress, I think they're pretty heavily incentivized to take the Anvil here. It's super greedy taking Terrarion because we could very easily top deck a red land, so yeah, they take the Anvil here, makes sense. Lantern's interesting, but I think we're much more interested in getting Anvil online as soon as possible. As you saw last game, it was really key in winning that, so I think we'll just play Fiddlebender here first, and then we can get Anvil online next turn, hopefully. Again, I think, you know, even against the deck that's running a lot of removal, oh wow, it survives. I think it's more important getting Fiddlebender into play, because if it does survive, it just starts running away with the game so quickly. So unfortunately we don't draw land off the Terrarion. I think we're just interested in getting Anvil in play here. Then we can play the Implement, cycle it away to try and hit a red land, and then we can get our second Anvil in play next turn. I think getting Fiddlebender activation is super important as a priority, because as soon as the opponent has removal, Fiddlebender is going to be dying, so we might as well get the activations off it while it's still there. Getting a Lantern is pretty huge to shut off Croxer as well, potentially. And, you know, if we miss land drops again, we can just potentially cycle it away next turn in order to get a token and hopefully draw towards a red land. Oh, wow, okay, nice. So there's a red land. Unfortunately it's tapped, but we can set up for it next turn. I think we're just going to sacrifice the token here and get a Synthesizer just to see what we hit. Okay, we hit a Terrarion. Now that could have been potentially a bit annoying if we'd hit a red card. You know, say we'd hit another Anvil, that would have been a card we can't hit, but I like getting Synthesizer into play here because it sets us up nicer for next turn, because then we can sacrifice a Synthesizer again. We have red mana in play, so we could play Anvil as well, but we could then sack Synthesizer or Terrarion to get another Anvil into play, and then we're getting towards that endgame that we saw last game where we just have 4 Anvils in play and they just can't beat that. They just don't have a good way to attack past it, and we're able to drain them every turn as well. Okay, so here, since we have so many artifacts in play, I can just chump block here, sacrifice in response to drain the opponent for 1, and then we can just get another token off Fiddlebender. Wow, it's surviving another turn again here, which is huge. So I think we'll lead on casting the Anvil here, and then I think I'm interested in sacking Terrarium first, because if we do hit a red card off the Synthesizer, we won't be able to cast it. So I think I'd rather just draw here. Oh well, perfect. So we hit another land. We could go for Glass Casket to kill the Trespasser, but I think being more proactive with Anvil is more important here. And then we can just play Ingenious Smith here. And then we still have an Anvil that hasn't produced a token yet. This is an interesting choice. Typically we'd want Synthesizer, but I feel like one way we could fall behind here is if they have removal for Fiddlebender and then they play a Planeswalker. So I'm just going to take the Pithing Needle here just to be safe, because I feel like we're so far ahead already that we want to shut off potential avenues of attack like that. You know, like I said, if Fiddlebender survives, we could tutor up the Pithing Needle off the Fiddlebender, but we don't want to give them the option of having removal into Planeswalker when we can play around that. You know, we're ahead, so we might as well play around more fringe scenarios. Oh wow, they activate Castle Locthwaite. I mean, that has to be a good sign for us, right? I guess they're just digging for removal for Fiddlebender, because we can very easily just get a 4th Anvil here if they don't draw removal for it. Interesting. They choose to take out the Ingenious Smith. Do they have another removal spell for Fiddlebender, maybe? I mean, I would always take out Fiddlebender. I guess they're worried that Ingenious Smith shuts off their only real avenue of attack, which is these Graveyard Trespassers, but letting us get the 4th Anvil here, surely that's really bad for them. Oh wait, we don't have a 4th Anvil, my bad. Oh yeah, I forgot they thought to seize one earlier. But that's fine, we can just Glass Casket one of the Trespassers. I mean, the unfortunate thing now is we don't have any more 2-drops left in the deck, but that's completely fine because we have so many tokens that we can just sacrifice them to keep getting Synthesizers and keep drawing cards here. So I think what we do here is we just shock in a land, unlicense Hearse, and just put Gigantha into our hand, and then just pass the turn back. So yeah, since we have all these tokens off the Anvil, we can just repeatedly get the 1-mana artifacts now, even though we're completely out of 2-mana artifacts. Hidetsugu consumes all. I mean, that's slightly annoying, but really not too bad overall, you know. Hidetsugu consumes all really isn't actually that bad against our deck, because most of our key cards are 2 mana. Like, it obviously does take out stuff like Soulguide Lantern, Terrarium, Synthesizer, and the tokens off Anvil, but all of our pieces that are really important to stay in play all cost 2 mana, so it's really not that good against us. It just kind of slows us down a little bit here. Okay, so they attack with the Trespasser here. I think we're probably incentivized to just Hearse whatever they Trespasser, because I assume they're going to hit the Ingenious Smith here to try and gain a bit of life. You know, they don't have enough mana to play and escape Croxer, so I don't think we get punished for activating Hearse before their end step here. I guess they're still deciding whether to attack or not. But yeah, I assume they hit the Ingenious Smith here just to try and gain a life, which we can stop with the Hearse here. So we'll get the Ingenious Smith and the Terrarium, start buffing this unlicensed Hearse that we could potentially use to block or attack with later in the game. Okay, Epicure's nice here because we did run out of artifacts that we actively want to sacrifice here. So we deal them one off the Epicure. Now we could just attack and play the Gigantha, but I think we might as well just start setting up our card advantage engines again just to make sure that we really put this game out of the way. And now we have 3 Anvils, we can actually start draining for 3 every turn if we wanted to. So we get another Synthesizer, we'll see what we hit here. Oh wow, another land is perfect, because now we can shock down and play Gigantha anyway. But yeah, since they're at 9, if we wanted to, we could just set a 3-turn clock with the Anvils and start draining, but since they barely have any chump blockers, it might just be better to start attacking with the tokens. I'll see what the opponent does this turn, really. But yeah, again, Hidetsugu Consumes All doesn't really do anything against us because we don't care about our graveyard either. It just kind of slows us down a little bit. And then we obviously have to deal with the backside once it does flip, but it's pretty slow to get there. Okay, Fable. So we don't have particularly good attacks here, so I think I might want to just sacrifice all 3 tokens here just to put them on because the graveyard's exiled. They're not going to be able to gain any life off Trespasser attacking anymore. So we'll just activate the Anvils here. And this is the other important thing with Anvil. If you don't have good attacks, oftentimes it's better to just sack to drain for one, because you don't want to be in a situation where you would have been able to kill the opponent on a certain turn if you'd started draining earlier. You don't want to give them enough time to get back into the game because of that. So unfortunately we can't sacrifice the synthesizer to the Fiddlebender because we have no 2-drops left in our deck to tutor up, but we can just sacrifice it to its own ability to create a 2/2 and see what we hit here anyway. Okay, so we hit a land. I think we'll just play the land here. I mean, we could sacrifice the 2/2 here, actually, thinking about it. Oh no, we can't. I always think that you can sacrifice any artifact to Fiddlebender, but it's just artifacts. So, sorry, I mean, I always think you can sacrifice any creature token to Fiddlebender, but it's just artifacts. We could portable hold a 2/2 here. We do then lose our only way of dealing with an escaped Croxer, but I think it's probably important here, just because we don't want to give them access to a lot of mana, just in case they do draw Croxer, or like a Planeswalker to draw cards. Okay, so they activate the castle, that'll deal damage to them, which is great, because now we're set up to, even if we kill all of our tokens here, we can still sacrifice the portable hold to Anvil next turn to create 3 more tokens, so unless the opponent has a way to gain multiple life here, we're pretty much set up to win anyway. I mean, even without playing that portable hold, we could have very easily sacked something like Unlicensed Hearse to only kill Anvil, so I'm pretty sure we'll be able to kill next turn regardless of what the opponent does here, unless they brought in a card that just gains them a bunch of life. You know, maybe Obnixilis, that could gain them 2 life. That could be annoying actually, but we then have Pithing Needle to just deal with that immediately, so I'm pretty confident about this game. Okay, so they fire up the den. They know they need to start applying pressure or they're just dead here. So since they are only leaving 1 blocker back, we could potentially I just want to make sure that we don't give them a free life gain off this. But yeah, we could potentially just let the damage through and start attacking back next turn, but I feel like that potentially then opens up to losing to certain types of removal. Like I said, I think it's more important at just making sure we get all 3 Anvil activations, put them down to 2, and then they're basically just guaranteed dead next turn, whereas if we wait and attack and they have something weird like a Flame Sweep or just some other type of removal, then that's a lot more problematic. So we can just activate the Anvil 3 times here, put them down to 2, and then we're pretty much guaranteed to win next turn. We can just sacrifice the portable hold to an Anvil, create 3 tokens, and then just activate Anvil twice more. Okay, so they pass here. I think we'll attack first here, just in case they have a removal spell or something. I'd much rather see what their last card is before I go for Anvil, just in case it's something weird that I'm not expecting. Okay, so they block. Okay, sweet. So we know what their last card is now. We can just go for the win. You know, I'm pretty confident that we could have just gone for it anyway, but just in case they were running, you know, some removal spell that gains them life, I think it's better to attack first just to see what their last card is. Okay, sweet, we got there. Okay, sweet, so we're going first here. Obviously we can't keep that with no lands, and this looks pretty good. Definitely going to put the Pithing Needle back, because that's pretty matchup dependent. You know, there are certain decks that it just doesn't do anything against, and we kind of want it in the deck to be able to tutor off Fiddlebender anyway. So I think we'll just lead on a tap land here, and then we can either go Anvil or Fiddlebender next turn, and then play Synthesizer on turn 3 to try and trigger either of them. So even though the opponent's led on a red land, which could mean removal this turn even, I'm going to play Fiddlebender out because we have the second copy, and I think there's just much higher upside. If the opponent doesn't have a removal spell, getting to untap with Fiddlebender is so huge. And plus it kind of sits in your hand. Just is really slow if you don't get it out early. So Sprite Dragon, probably Phoenix, I'd imagine. So we'll lead on the Synthesizer to try and hit a land. So, I mean, unfortunately we didn't hit a land, but Portable Hole's probably the best card that we could hit if we're not going to hit a land there. I mean, obviously we would have preferred to hit a land, because we're already starting to fall behind here, which is a bit annoying. So Iteration, I mean, they could potentially also be playing a Blitz deck. You know, I've seen some decks in Explorer that are basically like Spellslinger decks that aren't running Phoenix. But, I mean, Sprite Dragon, you know, could be either really, so I'm not sure. So, dependent iterations here. Next turn, we would, like, if we don't hit our third land, it's going to be rough, because it's going to be really difficult to know what to play here. You know, we could, well, we'll see what we draw for turn, but if we do miss land drops, then Synthesizer could draw us into another land, but if we miss, that's really bad. Okay. That kind of sucks. So we could Epicure and try and loot for a land, and at least then we get the Epicure in play. We could Synthesizer, which is the highest upside play, and then if we hit a land, we can Anvil. We could Anvil and activate to try and hit a land off the Synthesizer we have in play. I'm going to go for the Synthesizer just because it's the highest upside play. Okay, we whiffed. That kind of sucks. I mean, I kind of felt like since we'd already missed the land drop, we would need to get quite lucky to get back in this game anyway. So I might as well go for the higher upside play. Okay, they've got Sprite Dragon again. Oh, 2 Sprite Dragons. Okay, I mean, this is going to be hard to win then for sure. Miss land drops again. I mean, I guess we Rite of Oblivion, sack a Synthesizer and just pray we hit a land off this. Okay, sweet. So that's step 1. We're not completely out of this game yet then. So, I mean, even with all the card draw that you have in the early game, 22 lands, you very rarely have issues like this, but obviously, you know, you will occasionally come into situations like this where you will just fall behind, and Synthesizer, especially when you need to hit a land, can be sketchy because of that, you know. So here, I mean, we're kind of in a rough spot here where we obviously really want to draw a land here. But even if we do, we're kind of forced to Rite of Oblivion this Sprite Dragon, I think. If we leave this Sprite Dragon to live, it's just going to kill us in a turn or two. So we really want to draw a land, and then even if we do draw a land, I think we just have to Rite of Oblivion, sacrificing the Synthesizer, which kind of sucks because it means we're guaranteed to not play what we hit off the Synthesizer, but I feel like that's the only real play we have. If we don't draw a land, we can Anvil or we can Epicure and Fiddlebender. But, I mean, the opponent already has a 4/4 Sprite Dragon. That is going to kill us in a turn or two. I mean, I guess... Okay, we did draw a land. So I think we're forced to Rite of Oblivion. I was going to say we could Fiddlebender, hope it survives, and try and shoot her up a Glass Casket or Portable Hole to kill it next turn. But that completely relies on them not having interaction, which, you know... Against a deck like Phoenix or Blitz, they're going to have a decent amount of early game interaction, so... well, okay. That's kind of the worst case scenario, because the only card we have in the deck that can kill Crackling Drake is Rite of Oblivion, and we've just used 2 Rite of Oblivions to kill the Sprite Dragons, so... I think the only way that we're realistically winning this game is if we draw another Rite of Oblivion now, because I think with 5 cards in hand, we'd have to get so lucky for them to not have 3 spells to chain together to turn Crackling Drake into a 9/4 that will just one-shot us. So I think we just have to try and use the blood token here to try and draw a Rite of Oblivion. Let's see. Okay, we whiffed. That kind of sucks. So I think the only way to win now is to try and set up to draw a Rite of Oblivion for next turn. You know, we could play Ingenious Smith, but I don't really think... there's nothing you can really dig for, apart from, like, an artifact to set up with Anvil. So I think our only hope here is that they have basically nothing in hand, so the Crackling Drake doesn't kill us next turn, and then we set up to try and draw Rite of Oblivion before they kill us, but I'm pretty sure we're just dead here. So we'll just have to pass back and hope that they just have like 4 lands and 1 spell in hand or something, and they brick on that. But I'm pretty sure they'll be able to chain 3 spells together here. Okay. Or Arc like Phoenix, yeah. So unfortunately we lost there, but we did miss land drops for 2 turns. We did whiff on like 2 Synthesizer activations, so... But games like that are going to happen every now and then. So against Phoenix... At least we know they're playing Phoenix now, which is very important. If we hadn't seen the Arclight Phoenix, it would have been kind of difficult to know how to sideboard whether to bring in Graveyard Hate there. So, I think we can trim down to Glass Casket. We definitely don't want the Pithing Needle. I feel like I potentially want more portable holes, because we saw... I'm pretty sure they're running 4 Sprite Dragon, and they could very well be running Ledger Shredder as well. So I feel like I want some extra portable holes. I'm pretty sure, due to a lack of Faithless Looting, almost all of the Explorer Phoenix decks I've seen are running Ledger Shredder, so I feel like portable hole should be pretty good there. But then we've still got 3 cuts to make. Maybe we probably don't need the 4th Lantern. We don't need 5 pieces of Graveyard Hate. I mainly want 5 pieces of Graveyard Hate for the Greasefang decks. I don't know whether you need that much for Phoenix, especially because there's no Delirium. The only graveyard stuff you're shutting off in Explorer really is Phoenix itself. I'm just trying to think what else we want to trim here. Most things seem pretty important. I still want a fairly high amount of Graveyard Hate. I think I can afford to trim 1 Epicure and maybe 1 Ingenious Smith. Run it back like that maybe. Because yeah, I mean it's hard to know how much extra graveyard stuff they'll be running outside of the Phoenixes. They could be running Ox of Agonis, they could be running Demi-Lich maybe. I'm not super familiar with the Explorer Phoenix lists. Okay, this looks pretty good. Even though we have 4 lands, we've got a pretty nice curve out here. We can Terrarion on turn 1, Anvil on turn 2, and then we can synthesize it to try and hit more stuff on the following turn as well, which is pretty huge. So even though we do have quite a lot of lands, we have a lot of card advantage to dig out of the lands as well, so... Okay, another land. So we'll play the Anvil here, activate it, sacking the Terrarion, drain the opponent for 1, create a 1-1, and we get to draw a card here as well. So it looks like the opponent has something for red here, so I imagine it must be a removal. See if they end up using it or not. Okay, they used the Flameless Bolt. I mean, that's pretty good for us. I guess the opponent's trying to cut us off, you know, had we not had another artifact in our hand, that kind of shuts off the Anvil, but we've got Synthesizer and Portable Hole here. Okay, so they pitched the Phoenix. I think we'll lead on the Synthesizer here. Okay, another land. I mean, I think we'll probably activate the Anvil here because we want to start getting the Anvil back online and just hope we hit something we can cast off the Anvil here. Oh, perfect. That's great because now we can play the land and the Oswald. I waited until we activated the Anvil to play the land there in case we hit a red spell, and then we could cast a... Well, we could play the Inspiring Vantage from our hand and then cast the red spell. Okay, so Fiddlebender doesn't live here, which is obviously a bit annoying, but... you know, that's a card where if the opponent has removal, they kind of have to use it immediately, so... We are flooding out here a bit, you know, opposite to last game, which is a bit annoying, but thankfully we have Gigantha as a pretty good way to mitigate against the flood here, so we'll put Gigantha into hand. And honestly against Phoenix, I think Gigantha should be pretty good, you know, Unholy Heat's not in the format, and so the only card I can really think that they would have that could kill Gigantha is Lightning Axe, maybe. And I'm not sure how many copies of that they would even keep in, really, because... If they... I'm trying to think what they saw of our deck last game. It was basically just Anvil stuff, so... There's a chance they might not even keep many Lightning Axes in against us. Although I guess, actually, what am I talking about? They can see Gigantha face up as well, so... I think they probably do have to keep it in. Okay, so they do hit 3 spells together. So they get the Phoenix back. Which is a bit annoying, but I mean it's fine. We're at a pretty high life total here. Okay, Rite of Oblivion's interesting. So we could play Portable Hole and Rite of Oblivion, or we could Rite of Oblivion the Anvil, but that all seems pretty bad when we could just play Gigantha here. You know, we're at 18 life, so we're not really under that much threat from the Phoenix at the moment. And if we play Gigantha here, we're maximising our mana. We're putting the race really heavily in our favour, because obviously a 5-5 is going to be able to race a lot quicker than a 3-2. And additionally, it gives us draw steps to find something we can use to trigger Anvil, which we can then use Rite of Oblivion with. Plus, I was just about to say, I would rather save Rite of Oblivion for something like a Crackling Drake. Because, you know, we can survive 3 damage every turn, especially if we can get Anvil online, so I'm very glad we've saved this Rite of Oblivion for the Crackling Drake here. I think we have to just play Portable Hole and Rite of Oblivion that. You know, I'd much rather keep Anvil in play than sack it and save the Portable Hole for something else. Because, you know, they could very well have a Sprite Dragon or Ledger Shredder that portable hold could have been useful against, but one of the weaknesses of these blue-red decks is they don't really have any ways to gain life, so I feel like Anvil is really important at being able to give us reach in the late game and kill the opponent, even if they do find a way to kill the Gigantha. So even though we have flooded out massively so far, we're not in a bad spot. You know, Gigantha is racing, we've got Anvil back online, and we've got Rite of Oblivion ready to deal with another Crackling Drake. I mean, it is a bit annoying if they have something like a Sprite Dragon, because we would have to use Rite of Oblivion on that. They could bait out our removal and then play a Crackling Drake after that potentially, but we'll have to see how it plans out here. And even though we are flooding out, there are a lot of top decks that do get us straight back into it. You know, if we draw a Synthesizer, that's great. If we draw a Terrarian or an Implement, we can just activate Anvil immediately and draw another card, so let's see what we draw here. Okay, Implement, that's pretty good. So we'll lead by just attacking here, I think. Because if they end up killing the 1-1, I think we can just, well, we'll just sack the 1-1 to the Anvil, and then we can save them the Implement to sack again next turn, just to make sure that we keep having tokens. Okay, so they do have the Lightning Axe, that's kind of annoying. Thankfully they didn't pitch a second Phoenix though, so we know they don't have another Arclight Phoenix in hand. So since they didn't kill the 1-1, I think we're just going to play the Implement out here and then sack it to the Oni-Cult Anvil. Now we could use the Rite of Oblivion to kill the Phoenix, but I don't feel like we're at the point where we need to, and if we do that, we're kind of just dead to Crackling Drake. I feel like we can afford to take a few hits more from this Phoenix. So I'd rather save the Rite of Oblivion, because at the moment, you know, we're, you know, in a reasonable race with this Phoenix. We're doing 3 each turn and gaining 1. They're dealing 3 each turn, so we could potentially win this race. If we get greedy with Rite of Oblivion, we just basically lose to a Crackling Drake at this point, so I'd rather play it a bit safe. Maybe in a few turns we might have to use the Rite of Oblivion, but I think for now it's better to hold on to it. So again we drew another land. I mean, that kind of sucks. We are flooding out. Oh wow, these Sweltering Suns. I mean, I'm pretty happy about that exchange. I mean, I guess that does turn Anvil offline, but we have so many artifacts in the deck that we're pretty likely to be able to get it back online. Another Anvil, I think since the opponent's down to 9, we're pretty incentivized to just sack the Anvil here immediately and just start applying more pressure. Because like I said, one of the weaknesses of these blue-red decks is they don't have much good way to gain life. And so, you know, we get to ping them immediately and put 2 1-1s into play. They've already just used a sweeper, so they would need to find another one to take out our 1-1s. We're ahead on the race now as well, so even if they manage to chain 3 spells together, they might have to keep the Phoenix back on defense. So even though they have more cards in hand than us and we're just sat on 2 lands, I still think we've got a pretty good shot of being able to close this game out. You know, they don't have any ways to gain life, so even if we can't get into attack, we can just keep draining them every turn with the Anvil, and that's going to kill them eventually. And we still have the Rite of Oblivion available to kill Crackling Drake or Sprite Dragon if they happen to have that, so okay. They just pass. I mean, interesting. They didn't even try and bring the Phoenix back. Okay, drawing another land sucks here, obviously. We're flooding out massively, but thankfully the opponent also has a pretty slow hand by the looks of things, so put them down to 6. And now they're very much, even if they can block constantly now, they're very much within range of just dying to Anvil. So now put them down to 5, we're back up to 12. So now, I mean, if they can chain 3 spells together, I think they kind of have to keep the Phoenixes back on defense now, which is brilliant for us. Okay, so they play a land. I mean, I'm trying to think what their hand could be that they wouldn't have played anything last turn. Flameless Bolt. I guess they could just have a bunch of removal and they don't really want to just use them on our 1-1 tokens unless they're going to get Phoenix back. Yeah, it looks... Oh wow, they didn't even have enough to get Phoenix back. Okay, and Solguide Lantern's great here because we can exile the Phoenix off the Enter the Battlefield trigger and then sacrifice it to draw a card to trigger the Anvil and draw us a card, hopefully get us out of the flood a little bit. So yeah, it looks like the opponent was just stuck on a load of interaction. I guess that doesn't really line up very well against the Anvil. Okay, Epicure is nice because we can cycle away one of these lands, hopefully draw something a bit better. Okay, another Terrarian, nice. So I'm going to save that for next turn, I think. Because the opponent, you know, has been fairly on trying to keep us off the token so that we don't just get free Anvil activations each turn. So saving Terrarian basically means that them killing our 1/1 artifact token doesn't really do much here. Okay, they have Ox of Agonis, so let's see what their last card is. Oh, Spell Piss. Okay, so they were just stuck on lands and interaction. I guess that makes sense why they didn't really do much for a while. Ox is kind of scary, but I feel like they're at a low enough life total now where we're probably just going to win anyway. I mean, that's famous last words against the Phoenix deck. They could get 3 Phoenixes in the graveyard, but these builds feel way less explosive than the historic builds. Especially having to run Charter Course and stuff instead of looting. Okay, so I think I'm just going to sack the Terrarian here. See what we draw off that before making any other decisions. Okay, Fiddlebender's interesting. So we'll play the Fiddlebender here. I mean, we could activate the Synthesizer to put a 2/2 into play, but I don't want to play everything into another sweeper. They could have drawn another Sweltering Suns, so I don't want to just completely get blown out by that. Okay, they do have a Flameless Bolt for the Fiddlebender, that's fine. They're already down to 3 though, and it's since they're already so low on life total, unless they have a sweeper, they can't really afford to attack here, I don't think. Okay, they have 2 Phoenixes. I mean, if they're just dead here, right then? They had to keep them back on defense, surely. Yeah, okay, nice. I guess they felt like they weren't going to win unless they attacked, but I mean, Phoenix has a lot of ways to get back into the game. So, from what we saw, like maybe it was just the bias of that last game, but since we didn't see Sprite Dragon or Ledger Shredder, I think I'm happy to bring in this Smith here instead, and then, you know, that can dig us towards portable holes, and it can also dig us towards Soul Guide Lanterns and stuff to shut off the graveyard, so... Plus, it kind of outscales their removal, and it trades pretty favourably against their 1/1 removal as well, so this hand looks pretty good. We don't have any of our engine pieces, but we've got Portable Hole and Rite of Oblivion as removal. We've got Ingenious Smith to try and get towards our Oni Cult Anvils and stuff like that, so we'll see what they lead on here. Okay, they shock into Steam Vents. I mean, that doesn't really give us any information. I think I'm going to lead on the Epicure here. Or we could play Terrarian, actually. I mean, Epicure does apply more pressure to their life total, but I think Terrarian is higher upside, because if we draw something like an Anvil, that's just going to be able to replace itself immediately. And we can also activate Terrarian immediately to see an extra card deeper in our deck. So I think I'll probably play Godless Shrine here, and we could activate Terrarian first, but since we drew a land, I think we're fine playing the Ingenious Smith and saving the Terrarian in case we hit an Anvil off the Ingenious Smith activation here. Okay, so they Flameless Bolt the Ingenious Smith, but as long as we hit something here, yeah, we basically 2-for-1 them on that exchange, so that's fine. And since we also have Rite of Oblivion in our hand, I think we're pretty incentivized to keep Terrarian in play here, just in case they play like a Sprite Dragon or something like that. Whereas if we crack the Terrarian and then played the Ingenious Smith, if they killed the Ingenious Smith, then we don't have anything in play to sack to the Rite of Oblivion. Like, we could just play Epicure or Terrarian first, but I quite like having something in play to sack to it. So I think I'm going to lead on Synthesizer here. We're basically guaranteed to be able to play whatever we hit off it because we have the pathway in hand, which is nice. So let's see what we hit off it. Okay, another land, that's fine. I think we can shock this in, play the Epicure and the Terrarian here. And then we've got a lot of nice options for next turn. The opponent looks like they're on a pretty slow start, and we have quite a lot of removal in our hand to deal with whatever they have. You know, we've got Portable Hold to deal with Sprite Dragon or Ledger Shredder. We've got Rite of Oblivion to deal with Crackling Drake or Phoenix if they play them out. Now, unfortunately, we've had to shock ourselves a little bit, which can be scary against the Phoenix deck, but as soon as we hit something like an Anvil, we should be good. Okay, so they just pass again. Interesting. I think I'll lead by attacking here, just to see if they have any removal they want to use. And then I think we're happy to crack the Terrarium because we don't have much going on in our hand. I just want to see if we can draw something that will help us decide what we want to do. We could just put Gigantha into hand. Oh, okay, sick. Anvil's great. So I'm going to play another land out here before I play the Anvil because we saw Spell Pierce last game and it is a card that we sort of expect Phoenix to play. So I want to play another land just to play around that. Because getting Anvil in play is super important in this matchup. Okay, they do have Spell Pierce, so I assume they have 2 Spell Pierce here. Oh well, they don't. Ah, maybe they just didn't clock that we had 2 lands open. So we'll definitely sack the Terrarium rather than Synthesizer or the Blood Token here. Get to draw a card. Okay, another Implement. I mean, that's pretty good. That just shows that we have Anvil activations set up for like the next 3 turns at least, which is great. Okay, they have Crackling Drake, but we have the Right of Oblivion already for that, which is nice. And okay, Soulguide Lantern's great. So we basically have Phoenix and Crackling Drake on lock here, which is strong. Get an Anvil activation. Oh, okay, sweet. We get another Anvil, so we can play that actually. We can play the Anvil and we can play the Soulguide Lantern as well here, which is pretty sick. So now they can't get Phoenixes back. We have Right of Oblivion already ready for their Crackling Drake if they have that. We have Portable Holes for Sprite Dragon, so even though we're not killing particularly quickly here, I feel pretty good about this spot. And then we'll activate the Anvil just to get... I think I'll probably sack the Blood Token here, because we have the Implement in hand, even if they have a Sweltering Suns here. We can play Implement to get the Anvils back online next turn. And if they don't have a Sweltering Suns, that just increases our clock even further. You know, we've got 4 power in play. That's a 3-turn clock, ignoring any Anvil drains that we do as well, so yeah, I think they're in a pretty rough spot here. Let's see what they've got. I mean, thankfully they've had a pretty slow hand. It looks like they've brought in quite a lot of interaction against us, which I'm not sure is the best strategy. You know, Spell Pierce can be nice at tagging Anvil if you have it available on turn 1, but outside of that, once we have mana available, all of our stuff is so cheap that it's not that effective. I don't feel like single target removal is that good, but that's the other good thing about this deck. Since Fiddlebender is so strong, you kind of have to have single target removal to kill the Fiddlebender, or that's just going to run away with the game. But if you have the Anvil part of the deck, you know, it can be effective if you don't have any other artifacts, but the deck has so many artifacts in that even if they take out your first 1/1, you'll most likely be able to get Anvil back online the following turn anyway. So it looks like the opponent's either in the tank here, or they've disconnected, or they're just salty and they're roping out. We'll see. So hopefully it's not a disconnect. You never like to see that, but I mean it's pretty suspiciously timed considering how far ahead we are at the moment. Okay, it looks like they're timed out. So we'll just attack here. Puts them down to 8 if they don't have anything, and then we can... I mean, it's interesting here whether we want to use the Anvil to sacrifice one of our 1/1s or sacrifice the Implement, because the risk is if we sacrifice the Implement, we have more power in play to shut the game out faster, but if they have Sweltering Suns, then we'd have to either sacrifice a Portable Hole or a Soulguide Lantern to get Anvil back online again. So I think if we can get to our attacks here, I think we're probably better off sacrificing one of our 1/1s, but again, like I said, we have so many artifacts in the deck that we're pretty likely to draw into another one that we're happy to sacrifice, even if we do sack the Implement. Okay, so we do get to attack here. Puts them down to 8. I think, just to play it a bit safe, I'm going to sacrifice one of the 1/1s here, and then we can save the Implement for the following turn in case they have a Sweltering Suns, or like an Anger of the Gods, whatever sweeper they've got. So what would they need here to get back into the game? I'm honestly not sure. You know, Sweltering Suns is step 1, but they're still only on 4 lands. We can get Anvil back online immediately with Implement. I guess if they're running Shatterstorm or something like that. But I mean, one of the big advantages of running this deck at the moment is, as far as I'm aware, artifact decks aren't super popular in the format right now, so barely anyone is running By Force or Shatterstorm or anything like that. This is the kind of deck where I think it's definitely limited in how far up the tiers it can go, because if it becomes like the best tier 1 deck, people can just board in Shatterstorm against you, and you basically just lose to that. But as long as it's not being targeted, I think this deck feels really strong to me so far. Okay, so it looks like the opponent's either disconnected or they're just roping out. Okay, nice. Okay, sweet, so we're going first here. And yeah, probably a few more lands than we'd ideally like to see, but having turn 1 Anvil Enabler into double Anvil seems sick. We'll definitely keep this. Lead on the Epicure here and just see what the opponent's on. Okay, Spikefield Hazard. So Oswald is interesting here. I think typically, unless I know the opponent's like almost certainly going to have removal, and getting Anvil online early is beneficial. I think going for Fiddlebender first is really good, especially on the play, because it puts the opponent to the test. It kind of forces them to have removal. Okay, sound. So they don't have removal, which is great. That's perfect. So Virtuoso probably going to be one of those Blitz decks, which is pretty scary, but thankfully we can play Anvil and then sack the token here to get a portable hole out of our deck and trigger the Anvil as well. So Fiddlebender surviving here was huge, and I'm really glad I played the Fiddlebender first here, because had I played the Anvil, we don't have any removal, and this is the sort of deck that really punishes you for not having removal, if it's the sort of deck I think it is. Okay, yeah, I'm pretty confident. This is the sort of deck where they just buff their creatures, and so had we let that double striker live, they could just buff it with loads of spells, and they also run cards that can give their creatures trample, so because of that, because they can deal huge swings of damage in one turn, I think we should chump block whenever their creatures don't have trample wherever possible. And then we can just sack it to Anvil. Then because we have Synthesizer in hand, we have a guaranteed way to trigger Anvil next turn anyway, so... Okay, Implement's pretty nice, because we can, with 4 mana here, we can play Implement, we can then play Anvil, and then we can sacrifice the Implement to the Fiddlebender, trigger both Anvils to get 2 tokens, and then we can get a Glass Casket to get rid of this 10th District Legionnaire, which is huge. And then we still have another Glass Casket in the deck as well, which is really important. So we get 2 1/1s here, we get to draw a card off the Implement. And now they could have God's Willing to protect the 10th District Legionnaire, but I think it's still worth trying to go for this. Okay, no they don't. That's huge. So I feel like this is a deck where, as long as we can keep their creatures at bay, we've got a pretty good chance of winning. Now unfortunately, you know, chump blocking with tokens will work a lot of the time, but I'm pretty sure they run stuff that gives their creatures trample, so we can't rely on that all the time. Okay, so they have another Legionnaire. Okay, they have a Reckless Rage, which is a bit annoying. Fiddlebender dies, but we got pretty lucky they didn't have removal early on, and Fiddlebender's already provided us an insane amount of value in this game already. You know, being able to take out 2 creatures whilst triggering Anvil is pretty huge. Okay, so Maximize Velocity. Again, I don't think their creature has trample, and against this sort of deck, you don't want to be taking 5 damage. So we'll just chump block here, sacrifice the creature to drain for 1. Then pass the turn. Okay, and Genius Smith's a pretty nice one. I think I want to lead on Synthesizer just to make sure that we can hit everything that we play off Synthesizer. And we can still trigger the Ingenious Smith just by activating Anvil anyway, so there's no rush to play that before the Synthesizer, because we're still going to get a counter on it regardless. Okay, we whiff on the Smith, which is kind of annoying. I think I'm going to activate the Anvil on the Synthesizer here, because we're still guaranteed to play whatever we hit. Okay. I mean, that's a bit annoying. Now we're kind of out of gas a little bit, but we still have Gigantha available, which is a pretty big blocker, so... Now, we could have potentially held that Synthesizer until next turn, and then potentially just activated it to its own ability to get us 2/2. Okay, so they do have the card that gives them trample. I'd forgotten the name of it. So I'm very glad we chump blocked earlier, because if we let that damage through, we could be close to dead here. And I imagine they have quite a lot of burst spells that can buff their creatures to really big, so... So I think, unfortunately, we'll just have to let this hit us for whatever it ends up at. And, you know, it could be close to 10 power. So we'll let this through. We'll go down to 9. I don't think it's worth chump blocking yet, really. We don't really achieve anything while it has trample. Okay, they have another Legionnaire. I think at this point we just need to start sacking to gain life. We just need to make sure that we don't suddenly get burnt out by them having that trample stuff again. So I want to make sure that I'm activating Anvil twice per turn at this point. So we can attack in here because, I mean, they can block the Epicure, but they're already down to 7, so they kind of have to block the Ingenious Smith here. I think I'll just cycle the blood token here. Makes 2 1/1s. And then I think I'm just going to play the Soul Guide Lantern to get rid of the Maximised Velocity. We could have put Gigantha into hand to make the most of our mana, but I feel like we're so far ahead at this point, we don't want to risk them giving their creature trample, and then that maximised velocity being the last power they need to get lethal out of nowhere. They basically need to make their creature... How big would they need? So we can chump block for 3, and we can also drain them for 2. So they'd need to get this creature up to 15 power with trample. Yeah, okay, nice. So against this sort of blitz deck, definitely want the portable holes. I'm not really sure we want anything else, really. I think we just cut the Pithing Needle and the Graveyard Hate, because we're never going to really tutor for those. And then, yeah, just go up to 4 portable holes. All the creatures we saw were mana value 2 or less. They could very well be running Feather. You know, this seems like the sort of deck where Feather would fit in pretty nicely. So I think Glass Casket and Rite of Oblivion are very important to deal with Feather, but you know, everything we saw will be 1 or 2 drops, I imagine, so... Other cards I imagine they run, like maybe Soulscar Mage or the Luminancer, the white 1-drop. Arcanist is also sometimes commonly run in these sorts of decks as well. So maybe we want to keep some Graveyard Hate in thinking about it, but that's very speculatory, and I think everything else in the deck is, you know, until we see Arcanist, I think everything else in the deck is too important. So this hand we obviously can't keep, too many lands. This looks pretty decent though. We've got Summon Enablers, we've got Fiddlebender and Portable Hole. I think we'll put back the Epicure here. Even though it's a champ blocker, I think... actually, having said that, probably put back the Implement, because the champ blocker is very important, especially since they're on the play here. Okay, so they've got the Sajiri Shelter. I think we'll lead on the Epicure here. You know, there is something to be said about going Implement on turn 1, so that if we go Fiddlebender on turn 2, we have an immediate way to trigger it, but we can still play Fiddlebender, and if it lives, we can just play Implement the following turn. Okay, so we're definitely... They do run Arcanist. We're definitely going to Portable Hold that straight away before they get any value off it. And then we can just run out the Implement here. Like, it would have been great to get Fiddlebender down there, but letting an Arcanist live in this sort of deck is a disaster, really. You just need to kill that as soon as possible. Okay, Virtuoso and Soulscar Mage. I mean, we have the removal. I think we could lead on Synthesizer, but if we miss hitting a land drop, that's so bad. So I think we just have to Portable Hold the Virtuoso here. That's definitely the more threatening creature out of the two. And then we could also cycle away the Blood Token to try and hit a land here. This is a tough decision. I think the right play is probably to ditch Fiddlebender here. I feel like it's probably too slow and they probably have removal for it. But I also feel like if it survives, it's really important. I feel like the right play is probably to ditch Fiddlebender, but I'm... Oh, okay. I was going to say I'm going for the greedy line and I immediately got punished for it. Whoops. Yeah, I probably should have kept Synthesizer there. I mean, that's easy to say now. We've drawn a second Fiddlebender, but we need to draw our third land, which we're struggling to. So yeah, I mean, that was really bad. I definitely should have kept the Synthesizer there. So I'm going to let this through. You know, I'm definitely not going to block the trample creature. Okay. We didn't get super punished there. We're definitely going to Glass Casket the 10th District Legionnaire here. And then I think I'm happy to keep this Epicure back on defense, because they could buff this Soulscar Mage really big and not give it trample, and so having a chump blocker there is very important, I think. And then we can fire off the Implement at the end of the opponent's turn. So yeah, thinking about it, I don't know why I thought it would be a good idea to not pitch the Fiddlebender instead of the Synthesizer. That was really bad. So they do give it trample. So we're down to 8, which is kind of scary here. I guess my logic with Fiddlebender was that if it survives and we can start tutoring up glass caskets and portable holes, that's really difficult for them to beat. But we have, you know, we have to jump through a lot of hoops for that to happen. We have to not have removal that we need to play first. We need to play Fiddlebender and have it survive, and then also have an artifact to sack, which is a lot of stuff to go right. Whereas I guess keeping Synthesizer, you're much more likely to just draw into your removal naturally. You don't need to rely on Fiddlebender surviving, so... But we'll see. I mean, we have enough mana now. We could potentially cast Fiddlebender next turn. We can chump block with the Epicure and then maybe get Fiddlebender online afterwards, so... There's a chance it might work out, but we'll see. Okay, we drew another Synthesizer anyway, so... Not getting massively punished for the misplay. I think even though it shuts us off Fiddlebender, I kind of feel like we need to not waste resources here. Oh well, we hit another white land anyway. So unfortunately we do have to shock ourselves down to 6, but I didn't want to waste the Synthesizer, because we were already pretty low on resources at that point. Now shocking a land in there could... You know, we could very well get punished for that, but I don't think we're beating the trample card anyway, so... Okay, they Reckless Rage, so that unfortunately kills the Synthesizer. We're definitely going to block here, because we could be dead if they just have something to buff it. Okay, they're God's Willing. I mean, I think they're completely out of cards now, and they put one to the bottom, so this is the sort of deck where they need to have spells, really, or their deck just doesn't operate, so... If we can survive with them blanking here, we'll definitely play the Ingenious Smith here, try and dig for some removal. But yeah, if they don't draw a spell for next turn, they just have a 1-2 and an 0-1 in play. And, you know, it's very easy for us to develop past that and dig for removal and stuff. Like, once we get a foothold in this sort of matchup, it's very difficult for them to come back into. And, you know, the problem with their prowess creatures is without spells, they're just really small creatures that don't really do much, so... I mean, the fact the opponent's tanking here is definitely a good sign. If they drew a spell, I'm sure they would just snap it off straight away, so... My guess would be that they either didn't draw a spell or they didn't draw a good spell. If they didn't draw a spell, they're probably thinking about whether to bluff an attack or not, but to not be dead, I think we're forced to just block and hope they don't have anything anyway, so I think if they don't have a spell, bluffing an attack is really risky here. And like I said, I feel like if they did have any spell, they would just snap it off. Most of their spells draw another card or just buff their creatures anyway, so... Or they would just... If they had an instant speed spell, they would just immediately attack, because just one spell would put their Soulscar Mage up to a 2-3 and their Luminancer up to a 2-3 as well, which would kill both of my creatures in combat. Yeah, okay. I mean, them thinking for that long kind of gave the game away anyway, but... So we'll lead on the Anvil here, and we can start gaining life, which is pretty huge. I think we'll sacrifice the Synthesizer first, just to see what we hit. Okay, we hit a land, and we can now get the Fiddlebender into play. And now I think we can start attacking, to be honest. We can close the game out pretty soon, and they need, you know, we have chump blockers in play. This 2-2 has Vigilance, we know they don't have anything in hand, and so even if they draw something that can buff both their creatures, we can just chump block with the 2-2 and the 1-1, and then we have Fiddlebender next turn. And they kind of need... Okay, they have a portable hole, but they kind of needed... If they drew the trample card, I don't think we're beating that anyway, so... Okay, they hit the Fiddlebender. I saw they were looking at the portable hole, but they can't really afford to do that with our Fiddlebender in play. Okay, Epicure's not bad. We can you know, it triggers the Smith and the Anvil. We can cycle away the blood token to get rid of one of our lands here. Hopefully hit something better. Wow, Portable Hole, that's pretty sick. So now we'll take out the Soulscar Mage probably. And now I think we can attack with all three. Because we have, you know, we still have 3 creatures back to block here. Play a tap land and pass the turn. And now they would need to chain a bunch of spells together. They need like multiple Defiant Strikes. Oh, I was going to say, and into a trample spell. Okay, nice. Yeah, we got there. Okay, so we're going second here. I can't keep a one-lander. This looks decent though. Just trying to think what we put back here. I mean, with Synthesizer and Epicure, I could see probably putting a land back here. Although maybe that's a bit greedy. I think we'll lead on the Epicure here. Yeah, maybe with Ingenious Smith helping to find us more spells, we probably should have put a Synthesizer back here and kept the third land, because if we miss our third land drop, that's pretty problematic. I guess we do have Synthesizer to help hit it though, so it's close. I'm not really sure what the right play there was. Okay, so it looks like we're against Mono Blue Tempo, which I think should be a pretty good matchup, but I guess it just depends on how much removal we have. Oh well, they kept a one-lander. I mean, that's got to be good for us, especially with Fiddlebender, because as far as I'm aware, there's not a commonly played 1-mana counter spell that can counter creatures. And the only real way they're going to be able to deal with Fiddlebender is with Fading Hope and stuff, and if they've only got 1 mana, they'd have to tap out for it this turn, so Fiddlebender getting in play and living here is pretty huge, I think. Oh wow, okay, and we got the third land, so that's sick. So I think we'll lead on the Ingenious Smith, and then we can sack the token to get Portable Hole, and hopefully put a counter on the Ingenious Smith. Okay, so they do have the Essence Capture, but that's fine. That now we know which of these Spectral Sailors to Portable Hole off the Oswald, off the Fiddlebender activation here. So we'll take out the 2/2 Spectral Sailor. And I think in general, you know, once we have some sort of engine set up, Mono Blue Tempo is really going to struggle. I think Mono Blue Tempo in general struggles to beat decks that have a lot of cheap spells, which is kind of what our whole deck is. Having said that, we're already down to 14 after having to shock ourselves with lands, which is a bit scary, especially if they're running the Spirits version, because they have multiple Lord effects and they can flash in stuff that can get pretty powerful out of nowhere, so I mean, thankfully the opponent's been missing land drops, so that shouldn't be as much of an issue here for us. So we'll lead on the Synthesizer here. Oh wow, okay, we get another Ingenious Smith. I think we'll just lead on the Smith here. Even though that shuts us off the Fiddlebender activation, I don't feel like I'd really want to be... Oh wow, okay, they bounced the Portable Hole. I mean, that's completely fine with me. Implement of Combustion we'll get. I was going to say, I think it's better to get Smith in play because I'm not really that interested in sacking the Synthesizer this turn. I don't want to waste a Glass Casket just on a Spectral Sailor, and also we would miss on whatever card we exile off the Synthesizer anyway. Okay, they've got Curious Obsession. Also, at the end of last turn, I wanted to play that land tapped because this is very much just going to be a race, and I don't want to deal 2 damage to myself if I can avoid it. So we'll definitely play the Portable Hole here. I imagine they'll try and counter this with the Storm Tamer, and then we can just use Rite of Oblivion afterwards. So we'll see. Yeah, okay, so they Storm Tame with the Portable Hole trigger, which works out pretty well for us because we can now Rite of Oblivion, like we have to kill the creature with Curious Obsession on it. So we could either Rite of Oblivion the Portable Hole, but since we've got the Terrarian, we could just use that instead and just draw us a card, because we haven't hit our land for turns, so... Oh wow, okay, another Portable Hole, that's great. So now we have removal, we've got a lot more power in place, so we're probably going to be winning this race as well. I feel pretty confident about this game. I mean, obviously the opponent missing land drops is huge. They could have countered Fiddlebender if they'd hit their second land, they could have countered any number of other stuff if they hadn't missed land drops, but... I guess if they had hit land drops, they would have had less spells to play in the first place, so... So here I think I'm happy to lead on a Fiddlebender activation, since we haven't got much else going on, and since it is a race, I think I would rather take out some of their creatures, but we could also get Anvil here. I think probably I want to get Anvil, because Casket against either of these isn't great. We're not really losing the race against a couple of 1/1s anyway, and the Anvil will help us race even more, because it will obviously not only deal 1 to them, but also gain us a life every turn. So unless they can start mounting a lot of pressure, Anvil's going to help the race swing even further in our favour here. Oh wow, they bounced the Ingenious Smith, okay. I mean, obviously that is a reasonable tempo play because it slows the clock down. Smith no longer has 3 power, but they're not applying enough pressure to really make the most of that, I don't think. We're definitely going to play our land tapped as well because, like I said, this is a pure race scenario, so we don't want to deal ourselves damage unnecessarily. So we're draining for 1, they're down to 7, and we have way more power in play than they do, so we're winning on the tempo front as well here. I think it's going to be really difficult for them to win. We also have a lot of options going into next turn as well. You know, we have multiple Rite of Oblivions. I mean, that's a brave attack. I guess they kind of have to, though, right? So, we have a lot of options here. I think I'm going to lead on Fiddlebender. I'm going to get another Anvil into play here. Because, you know, like I said, they're not really pressuring us enough. And getting more Anvils in play will really help to swing the race in my favour. I also kind of want to attack first here. Well, not play too much else in case they try and bounce Smith again. Because I want to be able to replay it. Yeah, okay, they do. So again, that slows our clock down a little bit, but I really don't see how they're going to be able to win this race against 2 Anvils anyway. So now we can just play the Smith again. See what we hit here. Oh wow, we just whiffed. That's kind of annoying. And then, we could put Gigantha into hand off this Plains. We could play a tap land so we can play an untapped land next turn. We could play the Synthesizer, which I kind of want to do here because we can guarantee play what we cast off it. And we also want to put a counter on the Smith so that we're killing faster. And then we might as well just play this Lantern with our spare mana as well. Not sure it matters what we exile. I doubt they'll have much graveyard interaction. And then, yeah, I really don't see what they could play to get back into this. They kind of have to keep these both back to block here, I think. Oh, well, they attack with the Spectral Sailor, sure. So they can... Oh, okay, they play Terramanda. I was going to say they can flash in the Brazen Borrowers, but they can't block creatures without flying, so... We should just win here, right? We can just use Rite of Oblivion twice. So we'll Rite of Oblivion the Terramanda. I imagine they'll probably Storm Tamer to protect it, and then we can just flash back the Rite of Oblivion to kill the Terramanda anyway, so... So I think they're kind of priced into using the Storm Tamer here. Not that it'll matter either way, but... Oh wow, they don't, okay. So I'll just sack the Lantern here, because it's not really doing much. I mean, I guess it shuts off the Terramanda ability, but they don't even have one in play anymore, so... And I think it's more important to keep more creatures in play. I mean, like I say, it really doesn't matter either way, but... If you're just trying to make the most optimal play, I think more creatures in play makes more sense there. So here we definitely want the Portable Holes. I think this is just another matchup where we board in Portable Holes and board out of Pithing Needle and the Graveyard Hate. Nothing else in this sideboard is really that appealing. You know, Bankbuster is nice in grindy matchups, but this is just all about racing, so I don't think this is the right matchup for that. You know, there is certainly an element of card advantage to it, but they're playing much more of a tempo game, so I think we just want cheap removal. Just want to make our deck as low to the ground as possible here. Okay, so we're obviously going second now. And yeah, this looks pretty decent. We've got Epicure into Anvil, we've got Rite of Oblivion and Glass Casket as well, and Synthesizer to get us a bit of card advantage, so... Okay, they lead on Terramanda. Okay, Portable Hole's a nice draw there. It means that we can just take out the Terramanda. Definitely going to do that now because they could have Curious Obsession into Dive Down. You know, I've been burnt by mono blue tempo decks in the past doing that, so Now they could very well have Spell Pierce or something to stop the Anvil here, but I think getting Anvil into play if they don't have anything is huge. Okay, Lofty Denial, sure. But I mean, outside of that, we didn't really have great plays. We could have just played Epicure and not shocked the land in, but that doesn't feel great to me. And we don't want to play Synthesizer until turn 3, really. Okay. I mean, I think we want to lead on the Synthesizer just to try and hit our third land here. And then, if we do hit our third land, we can play the Smith. If we don't, we can just play the Epicure. Okay, perfect. So now we can play the Smith, and with 1 mana available, I don't think they really have a good way to counter this. Okay, we hit another Synthesizer. So unfortunately we don't put a counter on the Smith, but that's not really an issue. The opponent's not really pressuring us at all, and Smith is going to start growing and start becoming a real threat for them if they don't have an answer to it soon. So we'll lead on Synthesizer again here, see what we hit. I think we have to play the other one now. You know, we don't want to waste any, and we do want to try and hit land drops here if possible. Okay, that's a little bit annoying, but you know, with Rite of Oblivion, having multiple Synthesizers in play is actually a pretty good thing overall, I think. Well, they don't do anything that turn. Just trying to think what their hand could be. Either way, we'll lead on the 4th Synthesizer here. That'll put another counter on the Smith, make it a 3-3. Oh wow, we hit another Smith, that's great. So I'm going to shock the land in first, just because I don't want this to get hit by Lofty Denial. Although, does that really matter? Yeah, it's probably worth playing around. Even if they do counter it, we can make use of that mana to play Epicure anyway, so... Cool, so we play the Epicure. And I mean, the only thing with shocking in is like we are behind on life total now, but if Smith connects here, now we're even, and I have 2 creatures in play, one of which is just going to be growing to a 4-4 next turn, so pressure's definitely on them to do something about this. Okay, sweet. Okay, sweet. So we're going first here, and we don't have any of our engine pieces here, but we have, you know, decent early interaction, and we have Synthesizer to help us dig for these engine pieces as well. So I'm going to keep this. I'm also going to lead on the Courtyards just in case we draw a 3rd fast land here. I'm going to play the Sacred Foundry this turn though, because there's a chance we want to play Synthesizer at the start of next turn. So we want to have red mana in play, and we want to play Synthesizer before we hit our land for turn. Okay, so mono red Gatekeeper. This is probably a burn deck, I'd imagine. Interesting. So we could play Synthesizer to try and hit a land here before we play our land for turn, but I think just getting Fiddlebender into play is pretty huge. Now again, since we're playing against a burn deck, probably, I imagine Fiddlebender's just dead here. Okay, they play Chandra. They can still make mana off this, so it doesn't mean that Fiddlebender survives here. But I mean, with Fiddlebender, even against a deck where they're likely to have removal, I think it's still probably better to play it out unless you have a decent, a very decent alternative play, because Fiddlebender is a card that if you don't get it into play quickly, it's just quite slow to set up. Now in grindy matchups that's fine, but I think in general you probably want to be playing it earlier on. So I'm going to lead on Synthesizer here. Unfortunately we don't hit anything we can play, but we could Rite of Oblivion the Chandra, but that would mean we'd have to sacrifice the Synthesizer, or I guess we could sacrifice the Hearse, but I feel like the Hearse could actually be useful blocking later in the game. We have to deal with both of these threats at some point anyway, so I think we're alright dealing with the Gatekeeper first with Casket, which will give them an extra card off the Chandra, but we can then Rite of Oblivion the Chandra next turn, and we've got a pretty decent chance of being able to play what we hit off the Synthesizer, which is pretty huge. So unfortunately they do get a good hit off the Chandra. Fable is pretty strong against us because we need multiple pieces of interaction to stop what they're doing. I think I'm pretty happy to use the Hearse on my Fiddlebender here because we don't interact with the graveyard at all, and like I said, I think it can be potentially a good blocker later in the game, or even a good attacker if we need to close out the game. So okay, we hit Terrarian. I mean, we would like to get Epicure in play, but I think, you know, we're not going to not play what we hit off the synthesizer. And then, even if we miss lands, oh, I guess we can Rite of Oblivion the Terrarian again next turn to draw us a card to try and hit lands. Goldhound. So I guess that makes sense if they're running a lot of 3-drops. Like if they're running 4 Chandra, 4 Fable, that allows them to sack to make a treasure and play one of their 3-drops on turn 2. Okay, so they attack him with the 2/2. Oh wow, they have a Chandra. So it looks like they're kind of more of a mid-range deck, but still looks, you know, looks like the deck's got a lot of good cards in it. And they can also cast the Bone Crusher off the treasure here. So they're getting good value off their Planeswalkers as well. So I think, I really would have loved to use Rite of Oblivion to take out the Reflection of Kiki-Jiki, but we're going to have to use it to take out the Chandra here. That's definitely the priority. So we'll Rite of Oblivion the Chandra. Hopefully we hit a land off this Terrarian. That'll make things a little bit easier. Okay, we don't hit a land unfortunately, but we can get the Epicure in play, and then we still have another Rite of Oblivion to take out the Reflection next turn. So even though we are kind of limited by the amount of mana we have because we were missing land drops, we still have, you know, decent interaction, so... Okay, I don't think we really want to be chump blocking yet. Especially when we know they have a Bone Crusher. You know, if they play Bone Crusher this turn, I'd much rather have Epicure to be able to chump block that and save 4 damage. Okay, they have Gatekeeper. I think we'll wait to see what they pick here. What? Oh. Sorry, I thought they had to declare a target. That was a mistake. I was waiting for them to declare a target and then I was going to use Hearse in response. That might actually be pretty bad because we need to cast Rite of Oblivion here to survive, and the Gatekeeper's going to deal us 2 damage off it, so that was a pretty big misplay on my part. I'll have to remember that in the future, that the Gatekeeper doesn't target and you just have to exile in response. Well, having said that, that would mean that we can't Hearse in response. Right, because they would, you know, we're not going to exile their own Rite of Oblivions. Since we have 2 in the graveyard, okay, yeah, we're not being a Torbran. But yeah, that's odd with Gatekeeper. I just assumed it would target. That was my mistake. Okay, so that was a bit rough. They did have a very strong start and we struggled on lands, but overall I think, you know, most of the red decks I've faced I felt pretty confident against. So again, it does look like they're playing more of a big red deck, so I think Pithing Needle's pretty good. We'll definitely cut the graveyard hate here. Maybe Pithing Needle we only need 1 copy of, to be honest, because everything else in the deck seems more important. I think creature removal is more important. We have Rite of Oblivion to take out Planeswalkers anyway. So maybe the second Pithing Needle isn't that unnecessary. And if they have a hand without Planeswalkers, it's just kind of bad to draw anyway, so... Just trying to think what the last cut is going to be here. Probably a 1-drop. Probably Implement. I'm not really sure what the right cut was there, but... I definitely think we get better after sideboard when we have a much higher density of removal now with portable holes. Okay, we're on the play. And yeah, this looks decent. We've got Fiddlebender and Anvil here, so... I think we'll lead on the Implement here. And I think, again, we're probably going to try Fiddlebender first here. You know, put them to the test, see if they have removal or not. Okay, they don't have 1 mana removal, which is good to see. They could very well have a Bone Crusher or something like that, though. Okay, they got Strangle. That's fine. We can still get Anvil online this turn, which is pretty important. And we get to play Epicure as well, which is pretty good. So we'll sack the Implement here, get Anvil online. And last game we didn't get Anvil online at all, which is definitely one of the most important cards in this matchup, because it obviously gains us life and is constantly applying pressure to them as well. Okay, so they got Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Rite of Oblivion's a pretty nice one. Just trying to think whether we would want Portable hold the 2/2. Probably do. We don't want to give them a mana advantage if we can avoid it. And it also allows us to start applying pressure here. We're definitely going to be ahead on the tempo as well. So I think we also, you know, we'd have to deal with the Reflection anyway. So we might as well Rite of Oblivion now, so that they don't get any advantage off the looting on Chapter 2 either. And we obviously get the Anvil activation of Portable Hole leaving the battlefield there as well, so... okay, Ferocidon is actually a really big issue for this deck. Thankfully we already have an answer for it, but I have had some games where I've just single-handedly lost to Ferocidon. So, we definitely want to Rite of Oblivion. I'm just trying to think what we sacrifice here. I think we sacrifice the Voldaran Epicure. If we sacrifice one of our artifacts, it will create another 1/1 which will trigger the Ferocidon before it dies. And I think we also want to loot away a land here off the blood token, which will trigger the Anvil for this turn anyway. So I think sacrificing the Epicure not only saves us alive, but also gives us benefit from sacking the blood token here. Okay, sweet. Terrarian's great. That will just replace itself and get another Anvil trigger next turn. The opponent's already down to 14, which is great. And since they're not running a more low to the ground deck, they're definitely on the back foot. We're forcing them into the control role here, which is good. Oh, wow, Smith is great as well, because that's one that can pretty easily outscale the red removal if they don't deal with it quickly. Synthesize is a great hit. I think we'll lead on that here. Put another counter on the Smith. And then, since we haven't triggered the Anvil yet, we can attack with all three, and then we can just sack whichever one they block to get another token here. And then we can just play Terrarian to set up again for next turn. So, yeah, that was a pretty sick turn. We're definitely pretty far ahead on tempo now, so things are looking much better than last game. Okay, so opponent discards a Chandra. I guess we have too many creatures in play that they feel they can't properly defend it. Okay, they strangle the Ingenious Smith, so they do manage to get it before it outscales their removal, but we already got a lot of value off it already, so I'm not too bothered about that. See if they attack here. Okay, they do. I guess they are kind of restricted by their mana, and they are going to be getting a reflection of Kiki-Jiki next turn, so... okay. Chandra. So yeah, they plus it, which means that we can't freely attack it with our 1/1s. Oh wow, that was a good draw though. So now we can kill it immediately. We can sack the Synthesizer or the Terrarian here. I think probably the Synthesizer because we have so much mana available here. Oh wow, Portable Hole's pretty nice because now we can take out the 2/2 token as well. And then we can attack, and then we could also put Gigantha into hand. And I think, you know, mono red decks is probably where Gigantha is at its best because it can dodge most of their removal. You know, there's no Unholy Heat in the format, so it's gonna... oh wow, Chainwhirler. Chainwhirler is another one that is kind of brutal, especially when you have Anvil online. But again, I mean, I think we're so far ahead in the race here that that kind of, like, obviously it's bad, but it's only going to slow us down a bit. So here we absolutely have to kill the reflection of Kiki-Jiki, otherwise they're going to be able to copy the Chainwhirler every turn and just keep sweeping all of our Anvil tokens away. Okay, we are starting to flood out a little bit, but not the end of the world. And I still think we're doing pretty well on the race here. We're going to be able to get Gigantha down next turn, probably, unless we draw something else really good, so... okay, they go face with Play with Fire. So the opponent is starting to push back a little bit here, but... oh wow, Torbran. Okay, things are getting a bit dicier now. I think we have to block here and just really hope to draw a cheap artifact to play alongside the Gigantha here, because we'd love to get Anvil back online. Okay, perfect. That is exactly what we want to see. The Synthesizer... I mean, we could sack the Portable Hole here. I think we probably want to... We really want to get Gigantha into play, so... but... I also just think we want to dig for other stuff here. That was potentially a bit greedy. We could have sacked the Portable Hole just to get a 1/1, and then we could have saved the Synthesizer to just activate to its own ability next turn to get a 2/2. that was probably the play there. But I was thinking, you know, whatever we hit... Oh, wow, okay, that kind of sucks. But yeah, I was thinking whatever we hit off Synthesizer, as long as it's a non-land, we'll be able to play it. Okay, we might be in trouble here. We need something good off the top. Ha, I mean, that's pretty good. We've still got Portable Hole in place, so we can just sack that and get tokens back online. Huh. Yeah, I'm not really sure what the right play was there. Maybe it was correct to just sack the Portable Hole before, and then... what am I saying? Sack the Portable Hole, and then save the Synthesizer to make a 2-2. If we had a 2-2 here, that would have made things a lot easier. So I think we just have to block like that. And... I mean, just gotta hope to draw really well this turn, I guess. Oh, wow. I think that might have been one of the only cards that saves us here. So we just win here then, right? Okay, wow, that was clutch. So, again, I think we probably did misplay there. I'm trying to think if we need to sideboard any differently before I get into the next game. Probably not. But yeah, we did misplay. I think we should have... I think it was too greedy to sack that Synthesizer to Anvil. We should have sacked the Portable Hole instead. Saved the Synthesizer for the following turn to make a 2-2 off its own ability, but... I mean, we didn't get punished for it. That was a sick top deck. And to be fair, Epicure, as a way to close out games, you know, I was playing... Before I started recording, I was also playing a game against Control where I needed exactly Epicure to win alongside Anvil, and it got there, so... Epicure alongside Anvil is just sick at closing games out. Okay, yeah, this looks good. Smith is really good in this matchup, Portable Hold is great, and we've obviously got Anvil, which is sick as well. So even though we would love to play a Shockland tap so we didn't have to shock ourselves, since we do run a pretty high density of the fast lands, I think we have to play them just in case we draw another one. We don't want them entering tapped if we can avoid it. Okay, slow start from the opponent, which is great to see. I think we're interested in just getting Anvil into play here. You know, we could get Ingenious Smith into play, but that then just makes any of their removal live. And since they had a slow start, I would rather not give them free stuff to use their removal on. Okay, they have Chandra. I mean, thankfully we have the Right of Oblivion to deal with it, which is great. See if they have anything to play off the 1 mana here. Okay, no. So I think we have to lead on the Synthesizer here, and we might just have to waste the Synthesizer activation just to play the Right of Oblivion here. Well, we're definitely not playing Portable Hole, I don't think. So it just depends whether we want to play another Anvil here. I think just getting rid of Chandra is too important here. We do waste both Synthesizer activations, but we get the Anvil online, and I think just getting rid of Chandra is really important. So even though we did waste 2 cards there, I think it's worth it just to buy a bit of tempo back, because them starting to uptick with Chandra every turn is very problematic. And it also gives them access to more mana if their hand is stacked. So it looks like they didn't have their 4th land drop, so I think taking out Chandra is definitely the right play there. So we've got quite a few options here. I think we're probably going to lead on the Portable Hole just to take out the 2-2. They missed the land drop, so we don't want to give them any extra mana if we can avoid it. Then we can play the Epicure, we can play the Anvil, and then we can just start getting value off both the Anvils here. I'm going to sacrifice the Portable Hole because there's a chance that we might want to use the blood token to loot next turn, and the Portable Hole's not going to do anything, so they get to loot off the Fable here. Oh wow, they pitch a Ferocidon. I mean, I'm surprised about that. I'm also pretty happy to see that. Okay, so they play Fable again. Do they miss land drop again? Okay, that's pretty clutch for us. Wow, another Ingenious Smith. That's pretty good as well. So we'll lead on Ingenious Smith here just to see what we hit. Okay, Synthesizer's pretty nice. And then I think I'll play the second Smith because we could miss on Synthesizer. If we hit a 2-drop, we don't have a land to play it. So we'll just attack here. I'm pretty confident attacking with everything. They could block the Epicure, but that's fine with me. I don't really mind. I would much rather just start racing here. And then we can sacrifice one of our 1/1s. replace it with 2 more, and then we buff both of our Ingenious Smiths here. So the opponent, you know, they do have Strangle to deal with it, even if it survives another turn, but they're kind of in trouble here, because even if they have Chain Whirler, they can only take out the 1/1s, and the 2/2s are going to keep growing. So they kind of need to deal with the Ingenious Smiths pretty quickly here. Now on the flip side, we also do need to deal with the Reflection, because that is a card that can single-handedly win the game on its own if it's not dealt with, but we already have the Rite of Oblivion. We have a lot of looks for other cards off the Synthesizer and the Terrarian here, so... Okay, so they pitch what? A Play with Fire and a Fable. Okay, they attack with the 2/2. So I think I'm pretty happy double blocking here, because they're stuck on mana, so we don't want them to repeatedly attack with this 2/2. They could start copying it with the Fable next turn. We obviously can get blown out by removal here, but if they have something that can deal 2 damage, for example, like a Play with Fire, I would much rather them use it in combat there and not use it on Ingenious Smith. You know, if they try and blow us out in combat with a burn spell there, that's a burn spell they're not using to kill the Smith. So, okay, they do have Play with Fire and they're saving it for the Smith. Let's see what else they have here. Okay, Gatekeeper. So unfortunately they're going to take out the Rite of Oblivion here, I'd imagine. So that's a bit annoying. We don't have a clean answer to Reflection, but like I said, we've still got quite a few looks at ways to kill it. So we don't have good attacks with the 1/1s here, so I'm just going to make sure that we use our anvils to drain the opponent out. We just want to make our clock as fast as possible, because like I've said in the past, one thing you don't want to do with anvil decks is just build up a bunch of creatures, not activate your anvils each turn, and then just lose because you didn't start activating your anvils soon enough. If you've got good attacks, it's absolutely worth keeping your 1/1s around, but if you don't, it's worth just making sure that you activate your anvil every turn. And now we've got 3 anvils in play, the opponent's at 12. I mean, they're going to take an extra 3 here, so the clock is ticking down on the opponent here. They're dead in 3 turns if they don't do anything about the anvils, so... Now, annoyingly, they do have Reflections in play, so they can do the play where they copy Reflection with Reflection, just get a bunch of 2/2s in play. But with the 1/1 blockers that we've got off Anvil, I don't think that's really going to be that effective. And they've still got 4 cards in hand, so they've been very limited by their mana this game. So I imagine they'd want to play stuff out from hand here. I don't think copying Reflection with Reflection is really going to do it. Especially because they also have to block Ingenious Smith here, really. You know, if they don't kill it, one will be a 4/4, one will be a 3/3. Wow, Unlicensed Earth. Yeah, I mean, while people don't know about this deck, I've seen so many people bringing Graveyard Hate against me when this deck just doesn't care about the graveyard at all, which is great. Okay, so they do abrade one of the anvils, which does mean our clock is slightly slower, but we at least get the drain off it this turn. And again, you know, they're kind of forced to play on defense here because of the Ingenious Smiths in play, so... Now, it's like I was saying, you know, I don't want to waste the anvil activations, but it's tough here because we do kind of want to attack with everything. Yeah, I think I'll still drain for 1 because I'm not sure an attack with everything is that good here. They can afford to... what was I going to say? They can afford to block and just trade off with the 1/1s as well, so... Okay, so they make a copy of Gatekeeper. I guess they're going to hit an artifact here because they know we've got 2 artifacts in hand, so they'll get a bit of chip damage, but we're at 21, so I really don't think that's going to make much of a difference. So I'll lead on the Synthesizer here just to see what we hit, and that will also buff the Ingenious Smiths. We will take 2 damage off the Gatekeepers, but that's not really an issue. I just want to make sure that the Smiths are buffed before combat. Okay, so we hit Blood Crypt here. So since, you know, we could try and dig for more removal here, but I don't really want to take unnecessary damage off the Gatekeepers here if I can avoid it, so I think I'm going to try attacking first here. And since they have 3 blockers back, I think I'm only going to attack with the Smiths here. I don't want to go over the top and lose creatures unnecessarily. And they don't really have good blocks here. I'm happy to trade off with, you know, if they double block with a Gatekeeper, I'm happy to trade off. If they just chump block with a Reflection, I'm very happy about that as well. Okay, maybe we should have attacked with everything then, if they're going to block like that. Because then we could have sacrificed the 1/1 that they blocked with the reflection and got in for an extra point of damage there, so... Maybe it was... Yeah, I don't know, I'm not really sure. So what do we want to do here? We could sack the synthesizer to its own ability to get an extra 2/2 in play. But I feel like then we're more likely to run out of gas. They could have Chain Whirler to deal with all the 1/1s anyway, so I think it's better to keep the synthesizer back as an option for a following turn. Okay, so I think I'm just going to shock the land in here and just put Gigantha into hand. And then I'm pretty sure they're just dead next turn, you know, even if they have Chain Whirler. I guess they could copy the Chain Whirler. No, okay, sweet. Nice, we got the 5/0 then. That's pretty sick. But yeah, this deck has been so much fun. I've been really impressed with it. This is my third 5/0 with the deck, so if you're into Sacrifice or these kind of toolbox style decks, I definitely recommend giving it a go. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Drop me a comment if you got any questions at all.